I'll call this meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education, special meeting for Tuesday, January 20th, 2015. We expect everybody here, but at the present, Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick is present, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. John Convertito, Mrs. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. Llewellyn. We do expect Mr. Patton and Mr. Fatterbean. If I could ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. This is a special meeting to review the budget. We have normally walked through the budget at different pages at a time. Tonight on the agenda, you'll see the pages that we are covering for the budget. And so questions that will be directed on these pages because that's what the staff are here and prepared to talk about. The balance of pages will be then put on the next meeting's agenda. And then, of course, the final meeting, the entire budget is up for discussion and finally vote. It's a little bit out of the order that we normally take in terms of page one, and we just march through because the health and benefits section is up front. Mr. Tetro and Mr. Flynn are here in the event that board members would want to ask them questions. And Mr. Tetro in particular has an RTM committee meeting that he has to get to, so we'll deal with this first. I think Dr. Title may have some opening comments that he wishes to make on pages 38 and 39, 78 and 79, and 158 and 159. And after his comments, I'll ask if Mr. Tetro or Mr. Flynn have any comments, and then I'll invite the board to first ask questions that they may want to direct directly to our two guests who are here as resources, and then they can go on their way, and then we can talk among the board on any other questions that we may have for the staff. With that said, Dr. Title.
All right, I think it's best now, if Doreen come up to help me through this as well, that if you turn in your budget book to pages 158 and 159, I think we just need to walk through the mathematics of how we arrived at the budget figure. And once we explain that, then I think Mr. Flynn and Mr. Tetro will be there, because we worked very hard to have a collaborative process. This is obviously a very big part of our budget. It's been an increasing part of our budget. There was some consternation last year about the number and where it came from, what the assumptions were, what the expectations were. We're a part of the town. We share in a very important role in the Internal Service Fund, which is made up of a lot of different funds, but the Board of Ed health insurance is a big part of that. Keeping that fund healthy is important to the town's AAA bond rating. So we want to do our part to stay with the town's expectations. So at the spring of last year, we decided that we would consult with the first selectman and the chairman of the Board of Finance on how to do this so that we meet everybody's needs without overburdening the taxpayers. So let's look at 159. And I have Doreen just walk through, really it's columns 5, 6, and 7. So you've got the current year budget in column 5, and then you have two estimates that come from the Aon projections, the most recent of which were sent to you about 3 weeks ago. And then column 6 is where we expect to land at the end of June 2015, the current year. And that is important because based on what the fund balance is of June of 2015, that's our starting point to craft the 15-16 budget estimate. And one thing you'll notice, and I'm going to turn it over to Doreen really, is in the column 6, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are committing $700,000 in savings from 20 additional retirees that we did not budget for, and that's the estimated savings net from those positions. And to shore up our medical retention fund, we're committing to that amount of money this year. So that's factored into the equation. So, Doreen, let's just walk through the rest of the numbers in 6 and 7, and then we'll have our guests.
Yep. Column 6 is the estimate for the 14-15 year. We start out with the $2.3 million as a balance, which is the ending balance for 13-14. You'll see that down in column 4 towards the end. The operating budget is the $19.24 million. The 84 is the amount that was in wage and benefit for health insurance. 7.8 million is the employee contributions, retiree payments, other sources of revenue, rebates, COBRA, et cetera. The 700,000 is the amount that Dave just mentioned, the savings from additional retirees, which gives us a subtotal of income. Then we have this Medicare supplement program, which is a fully insured policy for a total available income of the 30.4. The next group of numbers, the 22 million, the 5.2, and the 1.3 for a total of 28.709 is directly from Aon's projections for 14-15 with November through November experience. There's a corresponding expense associated with that Medicare supplement plan, which gives us total expenses of 28.9 and leaves us a balance of 1.54. The IBNR number, which is calculated simply based on applying the percentage increase in the projected expenses, calculates to 1.68, which gives us, net balance of, just basically zero, a little 144, negative 144.
Before you go to the next column, I want to point out here that this does not include the $160,000 in the current year budget that we would be able to make as a contribution if the town bonds the security package. So if you added the 160 to this column, which we can't do right now because there's been no action on it, we would be fully funding our IBNR based on the current numbers. It also does not include any funding for savings. Oh, that would be next year's. Okay, so that's the big number for this year. So that's that column. All right, so based on that number, then we move to column 7.
Okay, column 7, we start out with the cash balance of 154. This is the operating budget number that we basically backed into because in consultation with the First Selectman and Chairman of the Board of Finance, they wanted us to at least, or we discussed at least maintaining our position of 1.54 million. So with the other income numbers of 8.6, the other, the total income of 32 million, the projected expenses in red from Aon again through November experience for 15-16 with a 9% trend. Totals of 30 million, which left us with the 1.54 cash balance. Again, calculating the IBNR with the percentage increase in claims for a negative 240.
All right. I think that's pretty much the math of it.
That's pretty much it. That's
yep.
it.
So maybe we'll...
So we can get back to the math, but if Mr. Tetro and Mr. Flynn want to make any brief comments, since I know that one of you need to move on, and then we'll go to questions.
First of all, thank you for inviting us here tonight. I think that a number of questions came up during last year's budget session, specifically around the changes in the balances, in this case on the internal service fund and specifically in some of the Board of Ed charges. We had a number of discussions coming out of that. And we committed then to sit down with Dr. Title, to sit down and look at the internal service fund as a whole, and specifically both medical funds in particular, and make sure that we were using the same assumptions going through that. And key assumption is the same trend. Experience is experience, right? The medical plans are a bit different, but we wanted to make sure we were on the same page with respect to the assumptions and working with the folks at Aon using the same trend. So that was the big number. The second piece, as you no doubt remember, there was an issue with the declining balance in the Board of Ed Medical Fund. And we made some changes last year. I think and forgive me if my numbers are approximate. I think Doreen can correct me if I'm too far off, but it was roughly about a $1.5 million decline in the balance. We wanted to buy the Board of Ed some time, not to have to address that all at once, as much as that is a very important number and we need to make sure that the balance sheet stays strong. We took $500,000 out of a reserve for debt service and moved that into the internal service fund. What that did is pick up the overall balance in the internal service fund by $500,000 so that the rating agencies, when they reviewed that, would realize that we were taking steps to maintain that and in essence would buy us some time to address the specific issues here. Overall, the rating agencies look at the internal service fund across, I'm going to call it all three silos. There's a general liability, a town medical, and a Board of Ed medical. So any one of those isn't an issue, but they do look at the overall package. The general liability one is the biggest issue. It's also the hardest one to work on. So while we're addressing that, we're trying to keep both medical funds on the positive side. So we were able to move that $5,000 in, take steps, and show the rating agencies that we were taking action. If you remember, just to go back a few years in history, the overall balance in it was much worse a few years ago. And we have shown the rating agencies over the past 3 or 4 years that we have addressed this and made progress on it. Right? Because when you look at the balance, this is not a single-year expenditure. This is a projection over the next 20 years. So it's not something that we have to pay out all at once. So having a negative balance isn't a reason to shut off the lights today, but it is a reason to make sure that we're taking action and have a plan going forward with that. So that was a conversation we had during the budget season last year. We sat down in, I'm going to say, October, late October,
It was later than that.
and reviewed what the assumptions were, where the Board of Ed was planning on ending up this year. And as a first step, I think we were comfortable with the assumptions being made to make sure we're on the same page with those, and comfortable that we're making progress toward it. But it's more than a one-year fix, so this is something we need to stay tuned to over the next couple of years. And with that, I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Good evening. Thanks for having us. I wanted to first thank the Board of Education for their hard work on the budget process. I know it's not easy, having gone through it myself for many years now. I also want to thank the Education Administration for their hard work. Ms. Mansell, Dr. Title, and their team. Each year, their budget presentation gets better. Their budget books get better, and the information is clearer. And when they come before our board, I know we inundate them with questions and follow-ups, and they've always been very willing and forthright in coming forward with their answers. And I wanted you all to know that that's much appreciated. One comment on the budget book, and I raise it only because it's come up at our board table numerous times through the years. I know that the state is working on a new general ledger that is going to be standardized across boards of education. It is my hope, and I know my board's hope, that that general ledger chart of accounts will allow for program budgeting so that we can actually see, and you can actually see, how much is being spent in each of the different programs across the town. And I know that's across the Board of Education. I know that has been a topic for us for a number of years, and I hope eventually we'll get there. I know it's a slow and painful process. As for our comments on the medical insurance fund, I first want to caveat my comments by saying that I'm speaking only for myself. I'm a member of a 9-member board, very smart, very well-intentioned members who do a lot of their own homework, and they're free to speak for themselves. So the opinions I express here tonight are my own solely, but they are based upon my experience on my board and being at our meetings and understanding what the context of the questions, comments, and concerns are. To Mr. Tetro's point, any discussion on the medical insurance fund for the Board of Education needs to be put in the context of the internal service fund for the town as a whole. So we do not look at this just on its own, but we need to put it in the context of how the internal service fund for the town as a whole looks. I do not have any new information on that at this time. We're waiting on that, as we'll see the budget presentation in the next month or so. I want to thank and recognize Dr. Title for bringing me personally into the process, as Mr. Tetro alluded, in the mid-fall as they were putting this budget together. And really the context of that conversation was, I hesitate to say it like this, but it's what would be minimally acceptable to the Board of Finance, right? What are the expectations? Or Tom, what are your expectations when we come before you? What are the quote-unquote hot buttons? So I gave kind of 3 hot buttons that were my own personal, but again, educated from my experience at our board table. And those 3 hot buttons are, A, do no harm, meaning don't put us in a worse position when we were last year, meaning cover your expense this year with contributions, cover your liability with contributions from your own budget so that the reserve amount does not go any lower. B, to the extent that you have any surplus in your budget this year and already identified as the $700,000 due to the increase in teacher retirements that were unexpected, the expectation from my board is that $700,000, or from me, would be that that $700,000 goes to this, as is reflected in these numbers, to help improve your balance from what was projected. And third, the $160,000 relative to security, as Dr. Title spoke about. There was a gentleman's agreement, a gentleman and gentlewoman's agreement reached last year during the budget process that to the extent that that $160,000 did not need to be used from your operating budget, but would be covered by bonding of security-related infrastructure and improvements, that $160 within your budget for this year would be put towards the internal service fund for next year. Those are 3 minimally acceptable things that I thought would get us over the some of the more emotional aspects and concerning aspects of the internal service fund, and would keep us in a better field than we are right now. And as you can see by the numbers, which we will review after you, bring us close to the IBNR. I will caveat this by saying you're using November expenditures on this, or November projections. We know that those projections will be adjusted for better experience numbers, or I should say more accurate numbers. Let's hope better experience numbers.
More current
No, just
numbers.
the latest available information, I think, is the way we phrase it.
Thank you. Thank you. Latest available information as it hits our board for voting later next month or in March. So I appreciate the time.
So,
Again-
Tom, I just want to make sure I
Sure.
clarify something. So,
It's not latest available?
no, it is. When you're talking about covering your expenses, sort of do no harm, where people will see that we've done that, just if you're looking at page 159, where Doreen's highlighted it in yellow, that we're projecting to end the year at a gross number of $1,541,330, right? And that's the exact same number that we're projecting for next year based on this budget. That's the top, essentially the top line number. The only difference between the net numbers is the increase in the IBNR. So when you say do no harm, you mean the cash balance in the account stays the same.
Correct.
Right,
And
okay.
the other item on that is, as well, is that from where we thought we were going to be, you've been able to improve that number by that $700,000.
Correct.
And-
Yes.
Yeah, and as I said, I speak for myself, but I think in general, I'm comfortable to say we would not look favorable if that, for some reason, did not happen
Right.
and harmed us with the internal service fund.
Okay. So again, to allow these gentlemen to move on their way, it'll be easier for me if I just go around the circle than if I try to keep looking as to who's raising their hand. So perhaps if I start with Mr. Llewellyn and we'll just go around the circle. If you don't have a question immediately, then we'll pass and we'll come back to you. And then we'll, once the two gentlemen have moved on, then we'll ask more questions regarding the detailed numbers that would be maybe directed to the staff. Mr. Llewellyn, any questions that you might have?
Sure.
And use the microphone.
Usually loud enough. Can anyone answer where the actual cash balance was of this fund at June 30? Because I know that that has been a moving target. At one point, we had seen it, I believe, almost like a -$1 million. I have a report here that had it kind of in a couple of different places, and I'm not sure that this net balance necessarily reflects the actual cash balance.
Do you mean the June 30, 13 or June 30, 14?
Correct, June 30,
Which one?
14.
14.
Does anyone know that?
Doreen would have that?
And that,
don't
we'll
think
get
this
that
is- this
answer,
makes
but that might be my opportunity to remind the board members, if you'd focus on questions that would be directed to our two resource people.
I am.
That would be helpful.
I am, because I know Mr. Flynn and Mr. Tetra will also see what goes on in this
So
account.
Doreen.
Okay, column 4, the actual 1314 column. The third number from the bottom, the balance as of 6/30, the 2.3110066, which is the ending balance for 1314, brings us up to the beginning balance in column 6 for 1415.
Okay, so we could see that on the balance sheet.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And then, in terms of the Board of Finance and the First Selectman's Office, how often do you see reports from Aon as to updates, and how do you use those reports? And what can we do as a board to help us get a better grip of what's going on in this fund, which seems to be relatively volatile?
We get updates every month.
Okay.
All right, those are reviewed by the CFO, Bob Mayer, and we sit down and briefly review what the trends are. You know, month to month, what you're going to see is the experience that's taken place, and as we've seen, there's been wide-ranging trends in the actual experience. So we project a trend at 9% is what you heard.
Right.
We've seen, in some cases, several years where the Board of Ed has done exceptionally well against that trend. We've seen some years where the town has done exceptionally well against that trend. So it's a question of keeping an eye on that and making sure, and that's part of what if you will look at the IBNR, that's kind of the reserve, if you will,
Right.
to allow for that trend to be a little bit negative in one year, to run over on the expenses and then be able to recover the next year. And as was pointed out, covering the expenses and then adding a bit more in to kind of come back to that reserve. So as long as we see that, there will be fluctuations. There's no way around that. That's going to happen. The issue is we just need to take some action against that. Typically, that's taken once a year as we're sitting down setting the budget number, because it takes us a little while to get the experience in to identify what the June 30 balance was.
Okay. And that June 30th balance is not net of the IBNR, though, correct? Or is it net of the IBNR?
I'm going to turn that one back to Doreen, I think.
It's a cash balance, yeah.
It's a
the
cash
cash
balance. It's a cash
Cash
balance.
balance.
So the adjusted cash balance is the 700,000 number, not the 2.3. And in terms of Board of Finance,
Yeah.
Mr. Flynn, how often do you guys receive updates?
Good question. We receive them 3 to 4 times a year. Sometimes it's the same number, though, meaning that we'll review the June number a couple different times as it gets finalized. And then during the fall, we'll take one snapshot look at what this looks like. And then during the budget time, we'll see it 2 or 3 times as we get best available information through the course of a budget time. It's not really effective for us to review it monthly, because it does tend to change, and you want to look and see the overall trend as opposed to try to do it monthly.
So is it fair to say you look at it monthly from basically the close of books through budget time, and then not necessarily in the spring?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think we typically, I think at the quarterly review, do one update on this, or we're in the fall, and then
Yeah, that's
we
what I
talk
said.
the latest available information. So that means as much as we may not look at the September number and the October number and the November number, though I think Dr. Title uses those as you start to put your budget together,
Right.
come January, February, and March, we're looking at the latest available information, because that's our one last shot before we set the mill rate on where we need to be. So we want to incorporate the latest available information into any changes we make so that the mill rate's as close to accurate as possible.
And we'll look at the end of the year, June, to see, kind of like this, where did we come out versus where do we thought?
Right.
And then we will look at one time in the fall to see, what do we think is going to happen towards budget time,
Okay.
right? And then, to Mr. Tetro's point, January, February, to the last available information, we'll look at it several times for when we set the mill rate.
Okay, thank you. And then you'd mentioned that $500,000 was put into the general service fund. Is that different than our medical retention fund, or is our medical retention fund part of that general service fund, or do they just net out?
There are 3 silos in the internal service fund. One is what we call general liability. Includes things like workers' comp. One is the town medical fund, and one is the Board of Ed medical fund.
Okay.
They're individually tracked, and obviously the Board of Ed one is budgeted for, and the town one is budgeted on the town side. However, when you look at the rating agencies, their evaluation criteria looks at them as one group. So they don't care individually if one is up or down. They're looking at the total number.
So was that $500,000 put into the general, I would assume? You said there are 3 silos. One is the general.
One is general liability.
And is the general liability where the $500,000 was put?
Yeah, and remember,
Well, actually, it was a 2-step process. The Board of Selectmen put it into the Board of Ed silo. The Board of Finance moved it from there to the general liability silo.
and let's be clear, just so that there's no confusion, that is all within the quote-unquote internal service fund, not the general fund of the town. So
Understood.
it's all within this.
Yeah, there's a single fund, 3 components of it.
Correct.
Okay. So the Board of Ed's medical retention fund didn't change, but we were shored up on the town side in the more general service because it came in and then went out. So as a whole, the town is in the same position, but the Board of Ed has not had that against their
Well,
books per
the-
se.
The town's
Yeah,
position's been improved.
If you look at the overall balance,
Mhm.
all right, the balance improved by 500,000
For the overall
for the
town.
internal service fund as a whole.
Okay.
Which drawer in the file cabinet we put it in
Yep.
is really all we're talking about.
Okay. Then that was my
Is that
question.
a fair way to say that, Tom?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. And then are each of you...
Mr. Llewellyn, is that almost your last, so that every board member gets a chance to
Well, I'm-
ask questions?
I'm surprised you actually started with me, but I'll keep going. But I'll do this one, then we can come
Out of
back.
courtesy to other board members and
course.
to our guests, so that they
No
can move
problem.
on. Good.
Are both of you comfortable with the pace at which this is being paid down? Because I do notice in the projections, we're still coming up with a negative net balance.
I think when you look at this fund, first of all, just to be clear, the general liability silo that we're talking about is negative. All right, and it's driving the whole internal service fund into a negative balance. All right. If you go back a few years, the town medical was in a negative balance. It took us several years to get that into a positive balance. All right, at that time, the Board of Ed was in a positive balance, so they kind of balanced each other out, if you'll forgive the expression there. So it's not, because it's a 20-year projection into the future, it's not something that's due at the end of the year.
Understood.
So from that standpoint, what we talked about was taking, putting together a plan that within 3 years would address this. It looks like we've made good progress in this year, in part because of the $700,000. When we were trying to cover a $1.5 million swing, $7,500 gets us partway there. I think there was some better experience Dr. Title voiced towards the end of last year, and we've got the $160,000 that we're looking to have put in. So when you look at that, 700 plus 160 is almost $900,000 to kind of correct a $1.5 million problem. So that's quite a bit of progress within 12 months, so that keeps us on track.
2 answers to your question. I'm comfortable with the approach that's been taken and the fact that, as Mr. Tetra alluded, there's been $860,000 to the good,
Right.
assuming we get the 160. I can't answer the question as to whether I'm comfortable or not, because I need to see what the fund looks like as a whole.
I agree.
And since I haven't seen that, I don't have an opinion at this point in time.
Okay, but in terms of what the Board of Ed is doing,
It's heading in the right direction, obviously. It's $860,000, assuming the 160 better, and assuming the 700 stays where it is, and assuming that the budget approves the revenue that's currently forecast against the projection.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mrs. Maxon-Connelly, any comments or questions for our guests?
I did, but Mr. Llewellyn covered it. Thank you.
Mr. Fattabine?
I guess my initial question is that you mentioned that there was, I believe, a $500,000 figure initially put into the Board of Ed Medical Retention Fund side, and that was then subsequently transferred to the general liability side of this internal service fund. That the question that is in my mind is that implies that the separate accounts you're keeping, or silos, I believe you refer to them, of the components of the internal service fund for the medical retention for the Board of Ed, would that balance in that fund be the same as the balance in our sheet number 159 in our budget book? Or are they different balances internally?
No, I believe so, yes. And that's what you're seeing, looking at there, as I understand it.
So my question arises is when you shifted from the Board of Ed retention fund $500,000 to put in the general liability fund, it reduced the Board of Ed side account or balance on that particular portion of the internal
Mr.
service
Fattabine,
fund.
is it, let me ask it this way, is it fair to say you recommended it, but it's not like the money actually went to one
No,
account and then came
you got-
out of that side?
You've got to look at it as there were two transactions.
Correct.
The Board of Selectmen, when it voted on its changes to the budget, when we voted on our changes to the budget, moved $500,000 from a reserve fund for debt service. In essence, taxes are $500,000 in 2016 higher than they would have been. And we moved it from fiscal year 16 to fiscal year 15 and put it into the Board of Ed Medical Fund. The express purpose was to make up for a projected $1.5 million decrease in the Board of Ed Medical Fund, to show the rating agencies that we're taking action against that, and to buy the Board of Ed time to address that issue over several years and not to have to impact the Board of Ed budget in a single year.
Now, it was my board that took the funds and moved them over to the general liability side.
And just to be clear on the timing, that was the next day. So we actually voted on that one day, and then it goes when the Board of Ed, or Board of Finance, in their adjustments to the budget, took the second step.
And there were several reasons for that. Number one, the deficit that was being caused on the Board of Ed side was due to several things that changed. Number one, your experience went worse. Number two, the assumptions used were different than the town side. And number three, we wanted to make sure that it was highlighted so that it would need to be addressed as we move forward. Now, the fourth item that we haven't talked about in this, and I'm surprised my colleague hasn't brought this up, is that you've got the Board of Ed medical side, which is pristine, meaning that's what it represents, Board of Ed expenses, okay? You've got the town side medical, okay, both retiree and active, which is pristine, because that's what that represents. And the general liability side, okay, related to the insurance, the workers' comp, and things of that sort. That one fund, which is entirely funded on the town side, covers both the Board of Education and the town side, not just the town side. So
For workers' comp.
and for
And
unemployment.
for other, yeah, unemployment.
I believe it's unemployment. Is unemployment in it?
in the budget.
It's in the budget. It's in a separate one. I'm wrong on the unemployment. The unemployment's in a separate one. But it's for the workers' comp. So when we, in essence, moved it over there, right, we were covering a deficiency in the area where it existed, which helped both sides, the Board of Ed and the town, even though the town is the one who picks up the tab on that.
And as-
Which we greatly appreciate.
And just to clarify, if you go back 3 budgets, we actually put a $2 million supplemental contribution into the workers' comp fund to address that, because that workers' comp line was growing dramatically on the budget. We instituted a safety committee across both sides. We did town and Board of Ed, we did additional training on the town and Board of Ed side and have managed to reverse that trend on the workers' comp, and that number overall has been coming down.
And Mr. Tetra, if I'm correct, even though it's a separate line item outside the internal service fund, the town does cover the unemployment costs for the Board of Ed side.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, just the other comment I have is just basically you mentioned a number of years ago, the general liability fund and the town side medical retention fund were not in very good shape.
Correct.
But yet the Board of Ed medical retention fund had a positive net balance.
Correct.
Which then helped out the town.
Correct.
So now, a couple years later, the town general liability fund and the town medical retention funds are improving, but to some extent, the Board of Ed's medical retention fund is not improving at the same rate. But I dare to say that it sort of balances out over those couple years where at one year we had helped the town side out a lot, and the next couple years now maybe the town will help the Board of Ed a lot.
And I think that's what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, I would say that that's distinctly different than a few years ago. There's much better communication between superintendent and his team in terms of what's taken place. We didn't have this meeting a couple years ago, so I think there's much better communication across the board, and it's something that we've highlighted as we did during the budget process, as we got together last month, and as we're talking here. So I think we're actually working together much more in sync to manage the asset, and this is more of a balance sheet asset than it is just a P&L issue.
But at the end of the day, Mr. Fadabin, your fact pattern is correct in terms of what's gone on in the history of that fund over the last number of years.
Is that it, Mr. Fadabin? Okay, Mr. Convertito.
Just two quick questions, and maybe sort of piggyback on Mr. Fadabin's comments. Several years ago, when it was the town side that was at a deficit, and the Board of Ed was at a higher, and maybe this is better directed towards Mr. Flynn, because you mentioned earlier that the projection numbers and the estimated expenses, we're using different factoring systems. Now that we're both on the same percentage going forward, do you expect that to balance out in the future?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Mr. Convertito.
It was my understanding that
Saying we're
now that we're
using the
using a 9%
same-
rate, and
Yeah.
and the town was using a 9% rate last year, and
Right.
we're using a different rate,
Right.
a lower rate. My understanding now is we're both using the same
That's my understanding
factor.
as well.
Okay.
Correct.
In doing so, do you expect that those two accounts now will sort of trend equally, assuming any unforeseen bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's based on your experience level. I mean, I can't say that, based on what the actuaries tell us, right? That's the expectation.
Okay.
But your experience level is your experience level. I think one of the things, to Mr. Fadabin's point, and our insurance agencies did tell us this, or our actuaries, the Board of Education for a number of years had a very good experience, a surprisingly good experience level, which allowed that fund and that balance, the balance in that fund, rather,
Right.
to grow and to cover some of the shortfalls on the town side a number of years ago. Unfortunately, your experience in the last couple of years has been much worse than it had been in recent history. So to the extent that they're right, you would expect that the trends on both sides would continue. At least that's the way I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding is if we're using the same trend analysis with a bigger pool, essentially, you would assume that the numbers would be more accurate going forward. Statistically, you would assume that.
One would think, and as Mr. Tetro said, that's something that in our consultation,
All right.
he was very adamant that the assumptions on both sides be the same.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at it, every year you get to take a look at what the balance is at the end of the year. So we look back on June
Right.
14 and see where we are, and you get to adjust that again. If your experience was a lot better than expectations, your balance went up, you might not have to budget as much for the expenses. If your experience was worse than expected or worse than planned, you get to budget a bit more the next year to bring it back up to where it was. There's always going to be a fluctuation because you're not going to hit the experience number exactly right.
And just as a point of clarification, the numbers that we're seeing on the bottom do not include the $500,000 that's in the general liability account, right?
Correct.
Yeah, they shouldn't. This should be just the Board of Ed silo, if you will.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly wishes to ask a follow-up?
Just
Go ahead.
one quick clarifying question. The fact that the 9%, that the two are in sync, I had been under the understanding that that's coincidence. I mean, that we're still going to be evaluated separately if our experience in future years should improve markedly, that our employees would be, that trend rate would reflect our employees separate from the town. So I'm incorrect about that?
Yeah,
That it
no.
has been all
The,
run together and will,
the-
going forward?
The trend rate that Aon provides is a national trend rate. That is what they recommend that to all of their clients. It's not specific to
So
the...
we had separate ones then?
We had separate ones. I'll say, I believe the rationale that Aon had is that when we're sitting on a balance in our fund that was substantially higher, they were comfortable with a lower trend rate. That didn't change their national trend rate recommendation. They were just comfortable with it because of the higher balances we were carrying. Now that we're not carrying those higher balances, they're comfortable saying, please stay with the national trend rate.
Okay,
Is
thank
that
you.
a fair
Yeah,
answer?
just to be clear, each group's experience is your experience.
Yeah.
Right.
So your experience can be very good, and the town side could be very bad. That doesn't impact your experience. All right, your
Your
expenses
trend,
are
right.
your expenses.
Yeah.
Right? However, the trend is used somewhere we have to budget for next year. In this case, fiscal 16 is 18 months away kind of thing, so we're trying to budget for that. We need some sort of trend, and Aon uses a bigger sample than just 500 employees or 1,500 employees to do that.
Okay. Mrs. Gerber, do you have any questions? Mrs. Carnell? No? Mr. Patton?
To follow up on what Mr. Fattabine and Mr. Convertito were stating about the fund balances, I understand it's an ongoing. You're saying it's a 20-year commitment in terms of to try and get the internal service fund overall, just to keep it in alignment. Do between the consultants from Aon and Mr. Mayor and your own experiences, do we have a time frame in terms of a number of years based on the history of the last couple, in terms of the Board of Ed is putting more money into their own medical insurance funds, how long that's going to take to try and get it to where we want it? And it's kind of a broad question.
Yeah, it's all based on experience. If you budget a number for experience or expenses, and you come in below that, your population is healthier, it will build up faster. If you come in on target, it's not going to build up that fast. If you exceed that, it's going to actually decline.
So
So
let
you
me
can't- you
let me try
can't-
another angle at
Go
that.
ahead.
Okay, because when we first sat down, way back, we were looking at a huge net deficit. And the discussion was, hey, look, it's going to be really hard for Board of Ed to make this up in 1 year. We may have to look at a multi-year, eating away at this thing. And then several things started to happen. Last year, for example, the trend reversed and regressed to the mean. So what looked like $1.5 million problem by the end of the year was an $850,000 problem, which I think was part of the rationale for why the 500 didn't have to go to the Board of Ed. So that was one thing that happened. The second thing that happened was that we're committing, essentially $860,000, which is essentially getting us all the way back to even in 1 year, right? And so the way this is budgeted is we're within a margin of error of essentially budgeting to solve the whole problem in 1 year. Does that sound?
Assuming your expenses.
Well, I mean,
come in,
budgeting for
and-
that.
and I'm not.
Yeah, based on the
You have
projections.
to pick a number. There's no way around it.
Right, you have to pick a number. So
when
we
you
are
get done
adding.
picking, when you get done picking your number,
Yeah.
if your experience matches that, you're in good shape.
Right.
So assuming that our June 2015 experience is on par with our 2014 experience, and we guessed right, which we know that it's never accurate. Based on right,
Aon guesses.
Aon guesses,
Yeah.
but
I hope it's
based
a
on
little more
what
than
Dr.
a
Tyler was
guess.
saying, that this is not, as long as we don't have horrible experience on one side or the other. Again, you never know that within a year we should be close to where we want to be. Again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth.
Let me, the only way I'll answer it, right, it's like,
You try.
yeah, exactly. It's like that scene, from The Godfather 3, where he stands there and says, "Every time I think I'm out, they keep pulling me back in." Well, every time I look at the internal service fund at the end of the year, it seems like they keep pulling us back in. Because a couple of years ago, as Mr. Tetro said, we put about $2 million from there, right? And we thought that was going to be a big dent. And then we got hit with the workers' comp stuff, right? Then we got hit with the experience declining on the Board of Ed side. So, you know, I don't think we're where I would like to be, because we cut it too close every year, okay? But the flip side of that is, if you get too far out ahead, you're holding taxpayer money, as opposed to allowing the taxpayers to keep their own money.
Actually, and employee money at this case,
And
because on
employee
both
money.
sides, we have percentage contributions
Exactly.
being paid by the employees. So you don't want that surplus to get too high. So you're constantly
Exactly.
managing that and kind of working that up and down. It's just not, it's not like buying copy paper and saying, hey, if we get to the end of the year, we just won't buy more. You can't
Exactly.
control that medical expenses the same way. The worst day of the year could be June 30th.
I was partially hoping that one of you would have said that, because from past experience, I do understand that, and nobody wants to hold employee money, you know, whether it's taxpayer money or
Or
not.
taxpayer money.
Right. But that's a
This
great point.
isn't-
Thank you for.
Yeah, you don't want to be the A student in this class by having the highest reserves, right? You want the reserves that's going to get you the AAA bond rating, and that you're going to be able to go to sleep at night. But you don't want to be the big kahuna.
Anything further, Mr. Patton?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah. And
Mrs.
just-
Lou McCormick?
Just to add one more thing there, we do have a AAA bond rating with a stable outlook that's as high as you can get. We have it from all three rating agencies. So what we're trying to do is manage this so it doesn't cause any problems for that. We're not trying to fix the rating agencies. We're not trying to fix our credit rating. We're just trying to manage this so it doesn't cause us any trouble on that side.
Correct.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, any questions?
I think most of the questions were addressed, so I just have really this one. So I understand we're managing this within a range so that we can manage our rating agency ratings overall. And so from your perspective, what is the right range for us to be trying to manage our net balance to? Right now, we're in the red slightly. Do you view that as good? Do we want to be here on a long term? Or are you thinking that we really should be carrying a slightly positive, say 500? Where do you start getting concerned, and where do you start feeling very comfortable?
Go right ahead.
I think that's what the IBNR is used for. That's in essence what the reserve is we want to have as part of that. We don't want to be negative, but we don't want to be, for lack of a better term, excessively positive, because that's surplus that's in there that we can't use.
Right, so I want to get a sense for what that means, like in dollar terms. Does that mean like 500,000 is not too excessive, or is that like a 2 million? Because we were at 3 million at one point.
Yeah,
Is
the
that-
IBNR
Yeah.
is a ratio of how much you spend each month on insurance expenses. And Doreen, what's the IBNR today? What's the next year's 1.7 million. So 1.7 million would be the number. Tom, unless you want to qualify that?
No, I think that's about the appropriate range, and you're going to be positive or negative on any given year on that.
As another way of asking this, if I could, the number at the bottom of the page of each column, the ideal location is 0, that you've covered your IBNR, but you don't have that much more cash because then you're holding it. Is that an answer to the question?
It is. I would say that the ideal number is 0 or a bit above 0.
A bit above.
Correct.
All right, so the way we're forecasted right now, we are kind of a little subpar from where we would like to be. And assuming that we use the whole 700,000 reserve and we have that 160 to offset from last year, then we are at this 239, which is a little subpar, but nothing to have a heart attack over because it's manageable in the greater scheme of things. However, if we were to get to a point where, let's say, the 160 wasn't really the 160 because we had to use it for security reasons or what have you, then the number might get closer to negative 500,000, in which case that probably crosses a line at that point where that isn't great, or that's still within reason, because if it's under $1 million, we're kind of comfortable with that from a town perspective. I just want to know how much wiggle room we have.
Take it if you want me to. Go right ahead. Yeah, well, first of all, the 160 isn't factored in here. So if you factor in the 160, your 239 comes closer to 60,000, somewhere in that area, 70,000,
That's not factored
80,000,
in,
right? Math isn't my strong suit.
Yes,
80,000. So that's within quote-unquote spitting distance, okay? If you were to go $500,000 below, I would feel uncomfortable with that. Now, I want to put that all in a bigger context, though. I don't look at this number on its own. I look at this number as part of the greater internal service fund. So if we have positive sides in the general liability, we have positive sides on the town side, right? And you're slightly negative on your side, we're probably okay. If we have negatives on all three,
Not good.
none of us are okay. See, I look at it as the greater context of the fund as a whole. Okay?
And then we also have to realize, as much as has been discussed here, that the town was negative for a while, and then they came back, or we came back, and then the Board of Ed was, has been declining. We can't count on that kind of balancing act in any one year.
Correct.
Both could go negative in the same year.
Right.
Workers' comp could be negative in the same year, because workers' comp is one of those things, again, you can have one big claim, and that can blow you out of the water in terms of what you were planning to do. So I think the issue is, and the other difficulty in this, is we're talking about, one of the big drivers in this is the experience. Okay, experience is what's happened in the past, and it's not something you control in the future. So you're, in essence, in a reactionary mode to some degree, which is why you have to be a little more cautious in planning for that. And that's why we use Aon to help us with the numbers. So it's not based on what we decide to do or what we want to do. It's based on what Aon recommends. We use the national trends, so it's not based on the fact that we had a good year. As Dr. Title mentioned, sometimes you're going to return to the mean at some point, so by using the national trends, you never get too far off of that. So by being appropriately cautious, I think that's what lets us track it, but we also look, as Tom pointed out, we want to look at all three. From your standpoint, you want to manage your silo as best you can, but we need to look at all of this in context of the entire program.
And to the earlier point, and this was my comment, we slice the onion so close, right? We're within a couple 100,000 here, we're within a couple 100,000 there, we're within, the margin for error isn't great within the whole fund.
And
Right.
just one of our structural liabilities at the moment is the general liability silo that contains our workers' comp number. That's negative.
Right.
I think it's negative about $4 million last time I looked. So we've improved that dramatically, but that is not something you control, but that's something we need to all work towards in balance. So if we
Right.
get that down to zero or slightly positive, that takes some of the pressure off the other two silos.
And I have to say, this is a very helpful feedback, because from our perspective, we are dealing with only one of the silos, like you said. So to the extent we can get guidance on how we can manage it so that it helps the overall town, because nothing makes you feel more guilty than, oh my gosh, we mismanaged our side of it, which is costing the town all this other stuff. And we don't want that if we can help it. So if we can understand what is an ideal place to shoot for, then I think we can account for it better going forward. So I definitely appreciate the feedback and color. And I would say that just from what you've said, the 2 million, the trends that we had in 2010, 2011, based on where you're now targeting, seems like it's maybe a little too much held in pocket, and that perhaps we would be happier with something like a $500,000 or $1 million cushion as something going forward. Clearly, if we underestimate the actual experience, then the $500,000 million can be eaten very quickly.
I think
But it would be a place to shoot.
I think the IBNR is a percentage of what your expenses are. So that's really why it's not a fixed dollar amount, it's a percentage. And realize your total number over the course of the year is 22 million or so.
Total,
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the net cash balance.
Yeah.
So I'm netting the IBNR against the balance and not just the IBNR number itself. That's where I'm coming up with the $500,000 to $1 million, the net cash versus the IBNR.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I think I see one hand, and if I can get one last question so the gentleman can leave, and then we can stay on this topic. I just am trying to be respectful of their time frame. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Okay, I just want to follow up from Ms. Lou McCormick's question. this is not something where you are asking us to be the leader on this. That this is where we are obviously working on our silo, which I think is a term we're going to keep using because it works, the visual is very helpful here. But if more is wanted of us, that will be communicated from Board of Finance and from the Board of Selectmen. That we are doing this according to you as two representatives of your board acting as individuals, that you're saying that you having the big picture, because it is not our job to manage those other, and we don't want to, those other aspects of the town. This is in line with what will have a balanced, the internal service fund where you want it to maintain the AAA rating, that you are not asking more of us, and that should the need arise where we need to do more, we would get that direction from your town bodies. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn, you get the last question.
Thank you very much. And am I correct to have heard you that if there is a surplus, that there's the expectation that it goes into this fund to help bring that up? I thought I'd heard that back when you started speaking.
Yes, I said that.
Okay.
And that is definitely the expectation of not just myself, but several members of my board, that I can say with confidence.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I know that Mr. Tetro in particular does have another meeting to get off to.
There's another meeting that's waiting for me, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thanks a lot. Let me just point out that with the help of these gentlemen, that you might recall that we were getting ahead of this even before the last fiscal year ended, and we made an additional contribution of $150,000 before the end of the year, and then when the books closed in July, we had another $90,000 that was put into this fund. So really, all of that went in here, and that also helped mitigate it, which helped get us out of the hole. So we've worked together on this all the way through, and as a result, the increase in the budget is about $2.4 million, which would be substantially worse if we weren't contributing the $700, if we weren't putting in the $160, if we didn't negotiate savings with the teacher's contract. But that still is the single biggest budget driver in this whole budget you're looking at. It's about 1.5% of the number. So it's, we're making up a lot of ground, but it's taking up a lot of space in this budget.
Are there any questions that we want to still ask on the pages that are shown on item A? Mr. Patton? Well, health and benefits, pages 38, 39, 78, 79, and 158, 159, the first item on our agenda.
Yeah, I think we restricted our comments and questions to there, so I think we
Right,
probably
so that's why I
wanna do
asked.
that around.
Any other questions? I think Mr. Patton raised his hand first, so I'll go there first, and then...
It was actually a general question first before I get into my other questions on page 37, et cetera.
But it's all related to health and benefits.
This is a quick general question. If the Board of Ed at the end of a calendar year has a surplus, the money goes to the town, and the town can normally just decide whether it goes to. Does it go in the general fund? I mean, they decide if they want to put that into the medical insurance fund or not, correct?
It goes into the general fund, and then the Board of Finance each year has a year-end meeting where they say, okay, if we have a surplus, what do we do with it?
Right, okay. But we don't decide whether that...
We don't decide that now.
Okay, that's what I wanted.
In these instances, Dr. Title was able to ask the town, and they agreed that the $90,000 surplus, rather than going into the general fund, would be expensed in our budget and as a supplemental appropriation to the medical retention fund.
Understood.
Yeah.
It's not a supplemental appropriation.
No, that's a wrong term. But
Correct.
Mrs.
We get
Ma-
nervous when we hear that.
Yes.
That's a term of art in the
Yes,
law.
I apologize
Okay.
for that. Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
I wasn't going to item A, I was still on this page, is that all right?
Oh, yeah, well, item A includes all of those
Well,
pages.
great.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder, and because this is where it could then appear later in the budget, had the administrator's contract been approved, this number would have been $130,000 lower. Is that correct?
No.
No. That would
No,
appear
the
lower?
$130,000 that was estimated in that settlement was cumulative over 3 years. So all we were budgeting would be 1 year savings.
And the
Which about
first
30, but-
year, because I looked that up just in case somebody asked it, I think the first year's savings was estimated at 31,000. And then the second year and the third year then added up to the total of 130.
That's right. Sorry, my mistake.
But that is not budgeted because, of course, the contract has not been settled. Is that it? Any other questions on this section? Any page? Mr. Llewellyn?
Absolutely. So if we look at page 39, please.
Page 39?
Correct. And 38 and 39 are the benefits section, kind of at the high level. We
Yeah.
Sure we can. So you've got 201, 203, 205, and 207, with 201 being the health insurance, 03 being life and disability, social and pension. The footnote over here, or the comment, says that there's a 12.5% increase. We heard that there are all these savings from the recently negotiated teacher's contract, and we know that our target is a 9% increase. Can you bridge, please, that 12.5 to that 9 for us?
Doreen, you want to walk through that? That's what that whole page is, that page 159 is.
Right, but let's boil it down
Right.
to percentages.
So that's where it happens. So, they're going to look at, remember, we're trying to cover a deficit here. So we're making up a deficit.
Okay.
So that's part of it. But you're looking at 9% trend on, whatever, $29 million worth of expenses. So that alone, you're going to be running $2.7 million, all things being equal.
Right.
Right.
So-
Right, so there you've got that problem. And then there's also, on the expense side of the ledger, there are increases that Aon had to build into the expenses beyond the claims. Right, so you got expenses associated with an increase in cost of your stop-loss coverage.
And that increase was?
It's in the documents we sent out earlier.
Okay.
something like
and
that.
can you
It's quite a
point-
bit.
And where's that, please? I'm looking on the page.
It doesn't show on here. It's in the total expenses.
Again, you need to
It's
get
in the-
close to the
it's-
microphone in order to...
It doesn't show on here. It's in the projection that they gave us.
Okay, and what's the number, please? I'm sorry, I don't have that at hand.
I think it was like 118.
And when you find the projection page, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, last year we only had to pay a portion of a year for some new tax, and this year we have the whole year. So then that adds to it as well,
Okay.
if I remember correctly.
Good, Doreen.
118,
$118,000 more.
right.
Okay. So basically 3.4% of this is kind of digging out of the hole. that
Yeah, we're
we're in.
digging out of the hole. We've got additional Affordable Care Act taxes. You've got higher stop-loss coverage. So if you go back to, because we sent this out as soon as we got it. We got the monthly update from Aon. We sent it out to you immediately. But you can go back to those pages and pick off the numbers, and they'll match exactly what's on here for expenses, and it'll break it down. So that's the issue, and also we're trying to get out of a hole. So those things combined, I think, pretty much do it, unless there's some other expense.
Not that I can remember.
Yeah. And the 9% trend, by the way, is medical. There are different trends for the different components. The medical is our biggest expense, right?
Right.
And actually, that's where I was going to go to next. If we go to page 78, please. And I look under 201 health insurance. We have 3 object codes there, which would be dental, health prescription, and retirees. Why do I see in the proposed 15, 16, 0 for dental and 0 for retirees? And why have we decided to consolidate that into one number rather than continue to track it on an individual basis?
We do track it on an individual basis, but I thought for budget purposes, it would be easier just to have one number.
How do we undo that kind of going forward? I think that is a lack of transparency that we don't need to add to something that's already pretty convoluted. So do we need to make a motion? I know all these new rules we want to follow here. So should I make a motion to have that restored so that we can actually see it going forward? Because I can't imagine
I
why we'd
would,
want to put it on to one number.
I would suggest that the way we have done this is asked fact-based questions on the 2 hearing nights, and on the second hearing night, which is next Tuesday, we've asked board members to recommend any changes they would like to make to the budget so that we can then act on all of the changes on the Thursday night that we approve it. So, John, if you would,
So I guess-
make that a motion that you would have for, tell us on Tuesday that you're definitely going to do that, and on Thursday, we'd act on it.
Okay, I'm definitely going to do that. So could the minutes please reflect that? And in addition, could we please get 201 re-provided to us with a breakdown of the projections?
What? You have the projections.
You have that.
You've gotten that previously.
So,
All the projections are broken down by line.
okay, so what is line 53-150, health insurance dental, projected, proposed for 15-16? I see a 0. So what is that number?
So that...
How much is dental projected to be
Yeah.
for 15-16?
Yeah. So that Ms. Munsell might be able to consult the actual documents. Is it possible for her to send that out to us in an email form? So that she doesn't have to kind of...
Yeah, it's in the
Quickly get to that.
projections that were already sent, and those numbers are reflected on page 159. It is broken out. The expenses are
159.
broken out.
So let's go to
So-
159. And where is it on 159?
Under expenses, there's
Okay.
3 expense lines.
So dental...
There's nothing hidden there.
No, I'm not saying it is hidden.
But you said it was not transparent. That means
Well, it's
hidden.
not in this page. I'm not sure why it would be 0 here. That's why I'm asking the question.
That was explained, but so that...
No, it wasn't
So
explained.
the projections are shown on page 159, correct? For each of the 3 lines.
Yeah,
Is that
projected
a correct
expenses.
statement?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And which, we have 2 total expenses that are different for 6 and 7. Column 6 and column 7. Nope, that's right, 'cause sorry, my mistake. So column 7, 30 million is the expense here. 23, they don't foot back, I don't think, do they? Because if I look, I see medical claims as 23 million, and when I go back to the first line of medical, which would be 53,250, I see 21. So that doesn't work. And if I look at retirees, I don't know, do I see retirees there?
You're looking at the bottom portion, which is the expenses, which comes straight from Aon and based on claims, which is fairly easy to break down into those categories.
Okay.
But as you said, it doesn't follow back because those numbers, those expense numbers of 30 million needs to be netted off against some of that revenue up above. The, excuse me, the 8.6 million.
Uh-huh.
So it's very difficult to take that number and break it down in between retirees, dental, medical, for every single group, for all 3, for retirees, actives. It just seems like,
But it's reported here on our quarterlies. So we know, if we look at the last quarterly statement, which I know is not the subject of this meeting, but our last quarterlies break out for us the fact that we are subsidizing retirees to some point and dental's changing. So I'll go back to my transparency comment. I don't see it in the 150s, and I'm asking that it be broken back out. So do you have those numbers at hand?
if you
Whenever
look,
numbers are combined, I wonder why they're being combined, when they've been reported historically as individual numbers.
okay, but if you look at historically,
Uh-huh.
and this is since the day I walked in the door, the retirees, if you look back, it's 1.153 million, 1.153 million. It's been our arbitrary number because it's next to impossible to break that down, the net number down into the retiree and active category by dental, health, and retiree.
But isn't retiree a separate fund altogether? It's Fund 64, whereas normal medical retention is Fund 63. So your general ledger has all the detail in it. Or am I missing something? Because I was just looking at the general ledger on my computer.
I think you're missing something.
Okay, so do we not have a Fund 64? What's Fund 64?
retirees.
Okay, so it's a separate fund. And what's Fund 63, please?
Active?
Active. So we do have a breakout, so I think we know what the numbers are. So I'm asking that we can
Okay, but how
see
would
the
we
difference.
how would we break out the Affordable Care Act fees? And how would we break out the administrative fees?
By head, the way they're incurred, I would assume.
As I say, that this is the way the budget is presented. If you would like to have a breakdown in a different method, then send us an email that says, here's how I want to see it, so that Doreen can react to that specific question and be able to, I'll say, outline why, the reasons why it may be difficult, so that the board knows, here's your question, here's the information, and then we can act on it.
Okay, I'm sorry. After the last meeting, I thought we were supposed to ask our questions in public.
Wait.
That's fine.
Oh, wait, on that point, before we
Mr.
leave that,
Llewellyn,
Yes.
at the last meeting, I very clearly said, please, so that the staff can do the homework that is necessary on very complicated subjects, for board members to submit questions in advance, so that dialogues like this may not occur, so that the staff could be prepared. That was clearly stated. You know that.
Okay, my mistake. I apologize.
can I, before we leave that topic,
Well,
Can I
Mr.
just
Llewellyn,
ask-
do you have
can I just ask a
further
clarifying?
conversation on that, or do you wish
I
to
will-
yield the floor?
I'll yield the floor and I'll come back.
Mrs.
Thank
Lou
you.
McCormick.
Sorry. So just on this topic, so is it my understanding then that for the prior years that are presented here, that these numbers are not really reflective of the true balance of the dental and the retirees, that they were just fillers that were repeating over the previous years because the data wasn't available to be divided?
The 1.153?
Yeah, so that
That's how
really,
it's always been budgeted here.
so it isn't really a true number.
It's an arbitrary number. The total is distributed between the three, well, the 1.15 was, or 3 was deducted from the total, and the rest was budgeted under dental and health.
Okay, so the dental and the retiree numbers were arbitrary numbers, and they have been historically, and they really don't represent the true balances.
No, that's not what I said.
I'm sorry.
I said the retiree number was an arbitrary number associated with the retirees.
And the dental?
Again, let me ask if I could allow Mrs. Munsell to take the question, look at the records that she has, and be able to give a more detailed answer.
It's okay. I
rather
just
than
want
asking
to
her to
understand
kind
this
of-
because this is an item that is just coming up for discussion, which is why sometimes these items are good to come up at the table, because these are items that I may not have otherwise thought of. But now that I understand that there are some filler numbers within this book, obviously my next question is going to be, how many of these numbers within this book are numbers that are somewhat arbitrary and have been fillers throughout this book?
So I'll ask Mrs. Munsell to do the research on the original question that Mr. Llewellyn asked, and if Mr. Llewellyn would be kind enough to send in the questions so that we don't miss the mark as to what your question is, that'll give Mrs. Munsell an opportunity to give an adequate response. Other questions on pages 38, 39, 78, 79, and 158, 159 from board members?
Oh, can I modify my question? Not just how many, but actually the question is which other items within the book are arbitrary numbers such
I
as
can
this?
answer that right now. None.
You're 100% sure?
I'm 100% sure.
Thank you. Any other
There are
questions?
estimates in the book,
Yeah, of course.
but they're estimates based on historical patterns of expenditures, based on known rates for utilities and so on and so forth. And the total for health insurance is a good faith estimate as a whole.
That's okay. I mean, I have to
The
ask the question.
breakout of, trying to break out that one little subset and try to expense the fixed cost across a very small group of people, in some ways, Doreen will do it one way, and then you guys won't like it, and you can argue about that, but the bottom line is, the health insurance is what it is.
No, really, what triggered my question, just so you understand, isn't really the number itself. It was the response that the number was somewhat arbitrary. And
Think
when
of it
I
as a
hear that-
Allocation,
placeholder.
not the number, the allocation to
Oh,
that
I'm-
particular
The allocation
line.
of the health insurance across the three lines, for that one in particular.
Yes, no, I understand.
We don't just pick numbers out of the air when we
No,
budget.
I understand, but when you use the word arbitrarily allocated across the lines, it means that it doesn't necessarily represent It was an arbitrary allocation.
It's really hard to allocate some things.
I'm not
That's
saying
what's
that
hard,
it wasn't
right?
difficult.
We've,
I'm just asking what other numbers within the book were
And-
arbitrarily
Right,
allocated.
you got the answer. The answer is nothing.
And the answer is, this is the only one that historically has been done that way because of the complications around trying to allocate it per person. Any other questions on A, and if not, we will move on to B. Last question, Mr. Llewellyn?
So in the budget, does retiree revenue equally offset expense? Because I know historically it has not. The district has subsidized, and so I guess the question, and the reason I'm asking for the transparency is because historically it's been that way. I'm not sure how we're projecting that.
That's in the, the last update, the monthly update. It shows in there, right? Retiree expenses and retiree income.
And let me answer it this
Sometimes
way.
it does, sometimes it doesn't.
And ask Mrs. Munsell, or maybe our HR director, that we base the fee that they pay, their co-insurance, their cost of the insurance based on the estimates, but because we are fully insured, self-insured, then if the cost of that health experience goes up, then maybe in a year you'll be out of balance. Because it's based on experience, ultimately the expenses.
Can we see a last 3-year history then, please?
Say again?
For the next meeting, can we see the last 3-year history of revenue versus expense for retiree?
Is that, can I ask if that is essentially on page 159, is that the retiree plan revenue, which is 187, 207, 200, and 192, and then the expenses
page are you on,
related to
sorry?
that? 159.
Okay, and you are on
And that the expenses related to it are shown down below. Is that the several-year comparison that Mr. Llewellyn is asking for?
No, because that's got
No, I'm
COBRA.
asking whether that gives the answer to the question or not.
No, it's not as easy as that.
It's not as easy as that. So that's another question that would be asked if you could find a way to address that question. What years we were good, and what years we
Just
weren't.
no, last 3-year
and it
history.
averages out.
Keep it very simple, last
Yeah.
3-year history.
Yeah, last 3 years.
Yeah, so we are required to charge retirees the same rate that we charge the actives. And in any given year, if they use a lot of health insurance, then that goes into the pot that way. We can't charge a separate rate for retirees as a separate group.
That's counter to what I thought I heard before. I thought that they were supposed to be, that the retirees were paying.
They pay 100%
cost.
of the rate, but the rate is the same.
Got it.
Right.
Thank you. That actually helps quite a bit.
Okay,
Thank you.
right. So in other words, the active employees, say, may pay 20%. The
Right.
retirees pay 100%. Whether that 100% actually covers 100% of their actual expenses depends on how much the retirees use. And when Aon was here, they actually went through that with you, by the way. You maybe don't remember this. They went through that, and they showed, because it's such a small group of people, all it takes is a couple people to have a bad year, and it looks like the whole group, because if you remember from the Aon presentation, the retirees had like a 14 or 15% increase in their experience. And some people asked Aon, well, why is that? And the answer was, well, because it's a small group, there's like 100 people, 2 or 3 people have some large claims, and it throws the whole thing out of whack. So year over year, you're going to get huge fluctuations in the retiree.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it, because you can't say, oh, the retirees are using 110% of the health insurance that they're paying in, so we can jack their rates up.
Nope,
So
that's
they
fine.
pay 100% minus, there's a subsidy that every retired teacher gets from the state. It doesn't come from us. And they pay the 100% of the balance between the state subsidy and the true rate. The subsidy is $110 a month for a single and $220 a month for a 2-person or a family. Hasn't gone up in 25 years. And so people who are retired are paying the lion's share of that 100%. It's very, very expensive to do that. So they pay the full boat. It's just that the actual experience may not square with the full boat.
Right.
Does that help?
Yeah, and it helps a lot, because I thought at one point I'd heard also that they cover the cost. But the fact that they are paying 100% is different from they cover the cost, so I've got that.
Right, yeah, they pay
clarification.
100% of the
Nope,
rate.
That helps.
Yep, good.
And probably over 4, 5, 6 years, things average out.
Well, you'd expect retirees to consume more health care than average.
Yeah.
Right? I would expect that, for a self-insured plan, that generally speaking, retirees being older and larger consumers of health care will probably expend above average. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're not covering 100% of their actual.
So, shall we move on to item B, which is historical data income, pages 1 through 19 and 21 through 31. Again, I'll ask Dr. Title if he has any comments he wishes to make. This time I'll start over at the other side of the table and go around the table, so Mrs. Lou McCormick will have the first question. Any comments that you wish to make on these pages? Dr. Title.
Well, I should just point out that in response to Ms. Lou McCormick's request, we provided to you at the table the per pupil expenditures for DRG A and B, because that's a supplement to what's in here.
Yes, thank you very much.
On the and so on the rest of that information I've already reviewed with you. On the revenue side,
Which page?
which is now which I think is also part of this, right? Or do you want to?
Yeah, yeah.
Revenue is part of this, right?
What page are you
Yeah,
on?
so now if we're looking at revenue, which starts on page 21.
Can I actually, before you move to that, I just wanted to make a note on this handout that you did for me, just for the benefit. I had made this request at the last meeting, and Dr. Title was so kind as to put this together, and he color-coded it according to the county, which I thought was really it's great. But I think the point that we wanted to make regarding this is that Fairfield is in DRGB, and DRGB is pretty much this area over here, because I'm not sure if everyone got this handout or not. And
think we
while
made
it looked
copies in the
as
back,
if
right?
DRG Fairfield was very low on the per pupil expenditures versus Southern, what do you call it, DRGA, or Southern Connecticut. Actually, in fact, if you compare Fairfield within its own DRG, which is over here, it actually kind of falls within the middle and slightly towards the higher side. Clearly, Greenwich is a standout within DRGB and really spends in line with DRGA. The DRGs, and correct me if I'm wrong, is really a measure of wealth within the community. And Fairfield, while wealthy, falls within the DRGB as peer areas. And therefore, we actually are in line with kind of our peer group, and slightly to the higher side, but pretty much in line, probably at a good place.
Well, it's DRGs are a measure of socioeconomic status of the
Yes,
community. There's a
right.
separate
Correct.
there's a separate calculation the state does for wealth ranking
Right.
and
Sorry,
ability to pay called the
socioeconomic.
ANGLIC.
Yes.
Right? So that's different. And also, our per pupil expenditures are controlled not just by your DRG, but by where you're located. That's why we did it by county, because the cost of doing business in Southern Fairfield County is a lot more than it is in a lot of the places where these places are located. So, it doesn't cost you as much to run the exact same school system in certain parts of the state as it does in Southern Fairfield County. And so I just want to, point that out, and the numbers on which it's based is on a separate chart. So that's, back, the matter is that I think the last time we did this chart, we used to be like second from the top. It used to be Greenwich, then us. We've actually fallen back about 6 places within DRGB.
So if we can get on to the agenda, we can get on to the questions. Okay, yes, please, Mrs. Gerber.
Well, I think one thing that's important to look at, though, in terms of DRGB, if you do want to look at DRGB, is the fact that in terms of increase from last year, or I guess it's 2012-13 versus 2013-14, which was the last numbers we have, we're actually the second lowest increase. So, for instance, Greenwich has an increase of, I want to say, let's see, almost $2,700 per pupil, whereas Fairfield's increase is $277 per pupil. So, I think that's significant. And the fact that last year or 2012-13, we were 5th, and now we're 7th. So there's Greenwich, Woodbridge, Region 5, Orange, South Windsor, Guilford, and now Fairfield. And that's in DRGB. If you look at DRGA, we're last. So, and we also still have the lowest increase per pupil if you compare us with the increases in DRGA as well. So that's just another,
Right.
thing to
And I would
consider.
like to, confirm that I agree that, in fact, this shows that we are kind of in line with our DRG and are probably in a pretty good place in terms of the amount of increase and how much we spend, and that Greenwich is clearly a standout for DRGB. They exceed all DRGB and really spend in line with DRGA. But Greenwich is a very, very diverse community, so they're kind of interesting, right?
And we're making argument rather than asking facts so that we can educate
No, I was just
ourselves.
showing my appreciation for the chart and
Yeah.
just to clarify for the benefit, because not everybody received this. what this
Let's
is.
start with page number 21 to go over the income.
Well, I guess I would point out on the revenue side, really pages 26 and 27 are really the previous pages are description of each of those areas. I should just point out that we've got a couple areas that show up as revenue to the Board of Education that were essentially one-time grants, and so if you look under revenue to the Board of Education, you'll see Smarter Balance Assessments, which was a technology grant that we won, and the School Security Competitive Grant Program. Those are projected at zero because we don't know whether we're going to get those again, but they show up as current year monies. We are showing an increase in the special education excess cost provision. We have, and this is helping us in the budget, it was one of those on the slides of helped us. We have 22 more students this year who are eligible under the excess cost provision than we had the previous year. A lot of those are students within the school system who have crossed over the threshold and we're now eligible. In addition, the state and the auditors asked us to, if we have an employee who's servicing a child who goes over the threshold, we are using an allocation method of the health insurance, but previously we'd used the actual of the health insurance, and that helps us. We had a lot of people say they were taking single coverage, we were putting in for single coverage. Now that we're using a blended rate, the claim actually goes higher. But a lot of it is extra students, whether they're educated here or elsewhere, that are driving that increase up. So that helps us net in the budget. But that's basically the reason for that. And I think that's all I really want to say on revenue, because the rest of it is pretty well in line with previous years.
So
I'll stop there and answer any questions.
So on the questions on 1 through 19, 21 through 31, Mrs. Lou McCormick, do you have any questions on those sections? And the answer is no. Mr. Patton, do you have any questions on those sections?
A whole bunch, and I apologize for not getting these in writing ahead of time to you. So you will have all my stuff within the next few days. I'll start with the state on page 26. Where is that an issue where we've got non-public transportation? So for the last 2 years, we've gotten nothing, and in the explanation, looking at the math here, allowable transportation costs for non-public school children are capped at twice the per pupil school transportation expenditure for the year prior to the expenditure year. And it says we were not funded this year, so that's basically money we did not get from the state 2 years in a row. Is that correct?
It's money we're not getting this year, and we're projected not to get it for next year. We did get it last year. And that money goes to the town, not to us. Doesn't impact our budget.
It doesn't impact our budget at all. Okay. Okay, I'll bypass the next one because that's also revenue to the town. Preschool tuition has gone up about $17,000, and that is 27 other sources.
Yes, we're seeing more full pay on the preschool tuition than reduced or half, and so we think that's going to carry forward into next year. That seems to be a trend. So we're
So we didn't raise tuition. There's just
No.
more students paying full tuition.
correct. It's just a mix of full,
Okay.
reduced, or free. I think that we may want to come back to the board. The tuition rate has not gone up since we instituted the program, and I think it's probably time for an increase in that. But this is not predicated on it because you have to set that tuition rate. I can't just arbitrarily say it should go up, but think when we started charging tuition maybe 3 years ago, it's been the same now, and most preschools go up a few percent every year. So we're probably due for an adjustment there, but this is based on the mix of kids that we're seeing in the program.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on that before you move on from that topic?
Do I understand that you wish to follow up on that question and would ask Mr. Patton if he'd yield the floor? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just
Yes.
before we moved on
Mr.
from the
Patton?
topic.
Or do you wish to
as
continue
long
your
as
line of
it's
questioning?
brief.
As long as it's brief. Ms. Luke
I'll try.
McCormick, a quick question.
Just kick me under the table if it's too long. All right, so my question is, can we get a breakout of the full revenues and costs of the pre-K program, including transportation costs, by school? And secondly, as a follow-up, has the pre-K program been successful in dealing with the, what is it, the inequity? The racial, yeah, issue,
It's referred to as the racial balance.
the racial
issue,
balance
yes.
issue. That's right.
Is that a question, since that will require some research, that the staff can
Yes,
get to you?
that's why I wanted to submit it now.
So now, Mr. Patton, back to you for your questions.
Just had one more thing, and I'm trying to figure out where it was. Public health and welfare.
Shall I move on, and then you can come
No,
back
just
here?
quickly, the non-public health and welfare line from the town,
And that's on page which?
and that is on page 27 at the bottom. There's an increase in revenue of about $8,000. And is that just an allocation that has been adjusted?
That's Andrea's the expert on that. You want to? This is another one that doesn't impact us.
Okay.
That's actually a number we have to give to the town. They have to budget it.
That line just supports the evaluations for students who are non-resident children who attend private schools within the town. Under IDEA, we have to do child find activities for those kids, and it's really just the salary differentials for all the staff who are in that account.
Is that it, Mr. Patton? That's it. Okay, Ms. Carnell? Nothing at the moment. Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, I just had a question, and I don't know if this is for this topic or for a different one, but just when you mentioned the school security grant,
Yes.
do we know when we'll find out if we will get that? I mean, are there? Do you have any sense of is that going to happen? Is it a possibility or not? And if not, do we know how that would be funded for the 15-16 year? Is that somewhere else in the budget? I didn't look. I just wanted to.
Okay, let me parse that question.
Okay.
So the school security is a competitive grant. They've had 2 rounds of funding. We put in for the first round of funding, and we were awarded the $147,296. There was a second round of funding. We put in for that. We didn't get any additional funding in the second round of funding. That money that went to Fairfield, that was reported, actually went to private schools who were eligible in the second round of funding but weren't eligible in the first round of funding. So that fund could be available in the future, but the legislature would have to renew that program, or the governor, bonding, whatever, and there's just no way to tell, A, whether they'll put it back out there, and B, whether we will get any award from it. So we did use a portion of that to pay a number of security expenses this year, one of which was to pay for the costs of the 2 private duty security people at the high schools. What we've been able to do with that is, once this fiscal year ends, we're actually going to be able to use the money that we raise from parking fees to offset those costs. We've always said that the parking fee revenue would be for security purposes. Thought it would have to be used for security out and about in the parking lots and so forth, but we basically earmarked what we have in the grant plus what we get in parking fees to basically have those to individuals. That programs stay in place at the high schools, but it does not impact the operating budget at all.
Thank you.
Mr. Convertito?
Yeah, one quick question. My understanding on the food service contract is that we have a mandatory payment from them. Is that also in 15, 16, or just 14, 15?
Nothing, no, not,
Are we
Nothing in-
guaranteed an income from Whitson's?
There's a guaranteed profit, but that would go into the food service
Right.
account, not the operating budget.
right.
Okay, so we're still keeping a separate food service.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
There's still a separate food service budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything else, Mr. Convertito? Mr. Fattabine?
Certainly. Yes, in the chair's efficiency, they seem to bypass me on pages 1 and 19. So I'd like to just go back and ask a question on pages 1 and 19, since we're on that same agenda item B. On page 8, the bullet point approximately in the middle, it says, effective January 2013, the accounting department assumed the town's BOE accounts payable responsibilities, comma, without hiring additional staff. Could you just explain what happened there? Or
Sure.
What happened?
And Doreen can jump in on this. For as long as anybody can remember, the town had been basically doing all the payables for us. We would authorize them, it would go over to the town, and they would cut the checks and send the checks out. And we, in consultation with the chief fiscal officer, said that we, to help them out, because it would get our vendors and people paid quicker if it didn't have another step. We would assume their responsibility for that. So we are now paying directly to the vendors, and we did that, and the town was able to reduce a position on their side. We didn't add any people in that department to do it, so actually was a cost containment measure that benefited the town. Doreen, is that about right? Or
That's
do you
right.
need to add anything to that?
No.
Okay.
So in essence, we took on a service that was being provided for us by the town.
Correct.
Okay.
Is that it, Mr. Fattabine? Mrs. Maxon Connelly?
Mr. Convertito asked my question.
Then we're on to Mr. Llewellyn.
I've got a couple of questions here for you, please. I'll start off, where Ms. Convertito left off. Could we please get the budget for food service? It is a fund that is under the purview of the Board of Ed, and as such, I believe that the budget should come before us. I'm not sure a budget did last year, and I think that that's something that's required.
It's a fund. It's really not a budget anymore, right?
We don't budget the fund?
Uh,
I think that got some problems in the past.
Yeah.
Actually, the budget would be Whitson's proposal.
So there was confusion, I thought, at least in my mind, in the last meeting about who paid for the capital improvements up front, how much money was left in the, how much cash was left at the beginning of the year and how much wasn't. I think if we're going to use the Whitson's budget, if it could be presented to us as the budget for the fund, that would probably be helpful as part of this process. We lost hundreds of thousands of dollars there in past years. I thought I saw, although the kids are enjoying the food, I think service was down slightly in a couple of the middle and the elementaries. We haven't had an update on where we fall, and as Mr. Convertito said, we're due a mandatory payment. So it would be really good, I think, for this board to be able to see that, given the past issues that arose.
So we can, the food service budget is Whitson's budget, we no longer manage that in-house, but if you'd like, we can add that as a topic on next Tuesday's meeting so that we can get into some of the questions
That'd be
that
great.
you're talking about.
Yep, perfect, thank you.
Okay.
And I would like to understand at that meeting, you know, how much cash we left behind, because I thought there was a requirement, and then there were capital purchases, so we kind of know where we are as we assess that. Going back to Ms. Lou McCormick's question about the preschool, as part of that information, could we see how many kids are full versus reduced versus free? And then the specific number of kids who are counting toward our racial balance numbers as well, because I know those numbers have changed in the past. But I think if we're going to do, if the purpose is to kind of look at the cost benefit of that program, we should understand all of the pieces. When we go back into the pages related to the new state mandates, how many?
Could you reference the specific page so that we're all on the same page, if you will?
Impact of recent mandates would be pages 17, 18, and 19.
Thank you. And your question?
So there are probably better than half a dozen items on here. Do we know for the current fiscal year and for the upcoming budget here, how many new FTEs have been added to implement these, or is all of this work being performed by existing staff? So it would be helpful to try and understand that as well.
Yeah, I think it's virtually all being done by existing staff members. We did have to finally bite the bullet, and we've put it in this year, is we used to have a 6/10 position in the business office and the health insurance department, and we had to raise that to a 1.0. And we put that in now because we were just way behind on all the Obamacare mandates and the reporting requirements that have hit us already on that. The additional data collection now on the individual mandate going into effect is enormous. And so the budget impact of that you'll see in the budget as a 0.4.
Right.
But it's already in this year.
Okay.
I can flag that for you.
No, that was the one I was able to pick out of the
Yeah,
description.
that's really the only one. Everything else is essentially being absorbed. I will say that while there's not an FTE associated with it, that the dyslexia mandate is having a major impact on our professional development account in the special education area, because it requires basically every single special education teacher to learn new skills so they can implement that correctly, and that's a lot of people. So it's not an FTE mandate, but it's a cost, and you'll see it in the professional development for the special education department line, goes up quite a bit. That's a big part of it. But I'm looking at the staff to say, are there any other FTEs that we could tie back to the mandates themselves? I'm seeing shaking of heads, which
For
leads me
the
to believe that
benefit
we're
of the
asking.
TV audience, your shaking of the head says no, that not to your knowledge at the
Right.
moment.
Basically, we're asking everybody to do more.
No, I think that's great.
Now, great is another way to think of it.
What's that?
Great may not be the way I look at it.
Oh,
but,
no, I think it's great
yeah.
that you're absorbing that within. No,
Right,
that's
yeah,
perfect.
and we have been. Last year was a big year, put out the mandates and the big balloons and everything. I just don't want people to think these things have gone away. The workload on these things has been astronomical.
Thank you. If we go to page 4 right here, 14, we have a number of software items listed. We have, I don't know how to say, Kaseya, we have School Dude, we have Infinite Campus, we have Raptor. In terms of a breakdown on all the different softwares, that's something.
Can I just interrupt for
Please.
one moment? Every time you turn your head to look at the page and keep talking, your voice doesn't transmit very well. So if you could find a way to try and always speak into the mic, that would be helpful to several
problem.
board members and probably the audience.
Okay, sorry about that. in terms of all the softwares that are listed on page 11, in getting into the breakdown, I'm not sure if this is the point to ask that question, because I know it's part of these pages and it's brought out here, or if that will be done back in the costing section. As in, I guess it would be under support
Yeah,
information.
probably best to get into that when we get into those line items.
Okay.
But Nancy Burns has a breakdown of the cost of all of those, the ongoing costs.
Perfect.
And I believe we can say that over the period of time where we've implemented these programs, we've actually saved money over what we were using for software costs for the same functions. So these have a certain cost, but over time, we've actually removed a number of disparate, siloed software programs and consolidated them so that I believe, and Nancy can talk to that next time, I think is when it'll probably come up on the agenda, it's really been a net savings to the district from the implementation of the programs listed.
Okay. We'll go through that then. Thank you.
And so that we might get a nice, neat memo like we got for world language question, if you could get that to Mrs. Burns, well, to Dr. Title, that might give her more research time to get you the information on next Tuesday.
Sure. Perfect. If we go to page 26 and the revenue section. Magnet transportation, is that inbound or outbound? In other words, is that what we're using as we send kids out to the aquarium, not the aqua program and the,
It's round trip.
but it's related to that?
Yes, it is. We get the $1,300 a student for every student who's in a magnet program. And so we are, multiply 1,300 times the number of kids, that's what we get. Number hasn't gone up in years. So it's a subsidy from the state for the magnet school program. So if we provide transportation, then we get that subsidy. And that amount is netted off the transportation budget.
And what page are I thought the magnet, the number of folks going to magnets was going up. So I expected that number actually to go up, not down.
It's been holding, in terms of the tuition.
In terms of both tuition and in terms of transportation for the reimbursement, because
Yes.
I know they're in here. What page?
Yeah, we do have data in there on it. We calculate a cost for kids who go to magnet schools where we have to pay tuition or we have to pay transportation.
Okay.
Some of those schools charge neither. So, for example, anyone who goes to the Fairchild Wheeler Magnet School, the new one, the high
Right.
school one, right?
Yep.
That, we are seeing students go to there in 9th grade and 10th grade. We have, they take a certain number of Fairfield kids every year. We don't pay for transportation to that program, and we don't pay any tuition to that program. So there's no impact on our budget, so you won't see it in there. The budget lines for magnet school tuition are only those programs that we actually have to pay tuition. And the same thing is true of Discovery Magnet. I don't believe there's any tuition there and no transportation. So obviously, we only get reimbursed for transportation if we provide it.
Right.
So that's why the number of students who may be going to magnet, as more magnets open, we might get more students going.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily impact our budget. Actually, in some ways, it helps us a
benefits.
little bit.
Absolutely.
Because you have fewer 9th graders. It's one of the reasons why some of the 9th grade numbers or 10th grade numbers, trend down a little bit, because we get kids going from both high schools to that.
And are they full day or part day? Are they second half? It depends on the school?
Fairchild Wheeler is a full-day program.
Okay.
The only, not cost to us, any resource, and this is only if it can be done within the schedule. If you go to a magnet school and they don't offer, say, any sports, and you want to play on a team, and you can get back in time to make the practices and so forth, then you can play for us and be on the team. But a full-day program, there's no other use of resources in that regard. The part day programs, like RCA,
Right.
then we have students here for half a day, and they go to RCA for half a day. And the other half-day program is the reverse. It's the aquaculture, right? Where one's in the morning and
Right.
one's in the afternoon. And so when we provide transportation, and we pay tuition.
We pay tuition.
We do pay tuition for those. I have to say that CES, who runs RCA, has been pretty good about keeping the tuition down. And you know, that's all dependent on how many kids sign up and how many slots there are. So that's an estimate, but it's some years RCA is really popular and other years it's not, and vice versa. So is that?
That helps a
Yeah,
lot, because
yeah.
I wasn't sure whether we paid for those, whether there was tuition to us or not.
Right,
And then I saw
right. The big
transportation.
thing is Fairchild Wheeler is no tuition. If we were paying tuition for Fairchild Wheeler, you know, it'd be a major line item for us.
Do we have a number of kids?
Yeah, we know how many there are. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think we're allocated like 10 per grade per high school, and I think they're pretty much being used. It may not be exactly 10 from each high school, and sometimes the kids go there and then they come back. We've had that happen. They go there, they think they want it, they don't like it, they come back to us, so that number does fluctuate through the year.
Right.
But a good estimate would be 10 per year per high school, per grade.
Thank you.
Yep.
And then one other question here on page 30. What is the $53,000 bump in rental fees and custodial staff, line 5398? 115 underneath that.
Yes, this is...
This is the revenue side of it.
This is the revenue side.
And it looks like it's happening this year already.
Yeah, it's already, yeah, well, we are, looks like we're estimated to collect a lot more in there than we thought. Is that what it looks like, Doreen? Custodial fees?
Mhm.
More rentals,
Right, based on what we've collected so far this year.
right? So we're tracking ahead of schedule on that.
Very good.
This was a new item in some ways the prior year, because historically we had never collected and kept the rental fee money. We'd only collected the overtime. So we're collecting that as well. And also, does it look like, Doreen, I know that's different. Okay, so we're
And-
collecting the rental and we're collecting the overtime, and so we're getting more rentals.
And to clarify, we collected the fee, but it went to the benefit of the town. The town agreed to allow us to collect the fee and
Right.
keep it in
Keep
our
it,
budget.
right.
It's not that we never collected it, it's just where the money ended up.
No, these are good things.
Yep.
And what about sports? I know we've taken off the fee here in the budget for the student, but does the town, or does the district rent out fields, or does that rental income go to the town? Like someone
If
comes
we
to use
rent out a
Ludlow High
field, we
School.
keep it now.
We do, and where's that on here?
That's in that fees.
So that's in custodial?
Yes. Rental custodial.
Got it.
So the sports facility rental, might as well point that out where it is in the budget, so I'm glad you brought that up. If you go up to 5369, sports facility rental, 315 rentals. Everybody see that line?
53, I'm sorry?
5369, sports facility rental,
Got it, yep.
right? So we budgeted, this is the pay to participate fee.
Right.
And we budgeted 56,000 in income. We're projecting we'll actually collect 48,000 this year, and we've zeroed that out for next year.
Yeah, so it looks like we've actually offset that, which is probably with the rental of the fields themselves, I would guess? That would be the bump in
That's helped us,
115?
yeah. It's helped us, but it's clearly, you know, $56,000.
Versus 53, so it's
Yeah.
working. Okay, great, thank
So
you.
that's where that is on there.
Okay, perfect. I think I'm good, thank you.
Anything else? If we're done with that section, Mr. Patton's last question on that section.
Dr. Tell, would it be possible for you, unless you don't know off the top of your head, to give us an example of either an organization or an event that rented a facility that we maybe weren't anticipating, just to kind of get an idea where this is coming from?
I can't do it off the top of my head.
Okay.
Mr. Cullen might know. We can We just track it in
And-
that department.
And again,
never
remember,
know.
remember that it may not be that we got a rental that we didn't get before. It's just that the rentals that we've always done used to go to the town, and now they're coming to us. So it might be not a brand-new person, but we'll ask Mr. Cullen to determine if there is a kind of a...
That's more my question is there anything that we should say, well, was this a fluke, in terms of it sounds like you're pretty sure that this is going to be consistent.
We'll get a response to that.
It-
If Mr. Fattabine and Mr. Convertito have the last questions. Mr. Fattabine.
Just possibly a point of clarification on whatever page at the head you pick on this. On the heading,
Is there a
going
page number
across
that
the
you're
top,
referencing?
you can look at page 28 if you want.
Okay.
The headings at the top, going across the top of the page, you have staffing levels for the first two columns, and then you have budgeted, and then you have estimated expenditure. Aren't these incomes? It's not really an expenditure, it's an estimated income or revenue.
This is where where we are estimating to actually spend the revenue that we receive. I guess that didn't make that clear. So,
Estimate of the revenue received.
well,
You're spending it on the other line items.
so let's look at excess cost on page 28. That's a nice big number.
On page 28.
Okay? So if you go back and to the revenue pages, revenue to the Board of Education, there's an estimate in there of excess cost. Revenue for this year, $2,794,038. It's on page 26, right in the middle of the page. Okay?
All right, I got it, I think.
Right? You go over here to page 28, and you see excess cost totals. 5105 is the summary. You'll notice the same numbers there, 2,794,038.
Right, no, I got it, my mistake. You
Right.
have your
No,
revenues
it's not-
on the
it's
other
not a
page.
mistake. I think
Well, my error.
Yeah, you got the revenue on one side, and this is where...
This is where you're spending that
Yeah,
revenue.
so this is essentially, if you want to think about it, our total expenditures are being reduced in that line by that amount. So in other words, for example, the special ed tuition line that's in the budget, if we didn't get any money from the state, it would be $1,872,019 higher.
So, right, my error, I got it now.
Okay.
So you got your total revenue on the preceding pages.
Exactly.
This is how you're spending your revenue.
Exactly.
What line items you're
Right.
spending that revenue you received.
This
All
is a
right,
relatively new thing that we did a few years ago that I know some of the boards really wanted to say. Exactly how are you spending your grant money?
All right, no, I appreciate that
Is that it,
clarification.
Mr. Fattabine?
That's it.
Mr. Convertito, do you have the last question?
My last question, I don't know if it's the last question for the board.
On these
this here,
pages.
On
Yeah.
these pages. Just a point of clarification. On page 27, other sources of income, custodial fees, 80, building rentals, 60. It seems to me that that's a combined number on 5398.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, okay.
That's what justifies the 140?
That's where the 140 came from.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you foot that across to where?
Excuse me?
You foot that to where just now?
If you go to page 30, 5398, the same number you were asking
Okay,
about, the
got it. I
140.
see it, yep.
Okay. We break it out as income,
Yep.
and we're using it all, so we're expensing it out here to overtime custodial fees. Is that what we're using the offset for? Am I reading that correctly?
That is where we're expensing it all against custodial overtime.
Okay.
Some of it is payment for overtime, and some of it's payment for building rentals.
But
So in other words,
that's where it's being.
that's where it's
expensed
come
at.
from. So it's, again, back on the page 30, that's a list of of where we're expensing it to.
Right,
So the whole 140 is going against the custodial overtime account.
right, okay.
Okay? But the source of the revenue is combined.
No.
Yeah.
I know we had a big discussion about this.
Yep.
It was a big issue.
Yeah, no, this was
to
a-
offset the overtime.
Exactly.
A couple of years ago, and I just want to make sure it's still going.
Right, so that's where it
Okay.
comes from.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Just to follow up on the
So
revenue.
why don't we move on to item C?
John,
Just to follow up on the revenue, is the revenue, like, for the rental fees, is that still going into the private fund, Fund 21, or is that going into the general fund going forward? Fund 11, Fund 21.
I know,
What do
Doreen
you mean
answers
by
fund
private fund?
questions.
The Fund 21, with the whole to-do last year over the Fund 21 revenue coming in, going out to food service, and overtime coming in and going out. So you book things either to Fund 11, which is your general fund, or you'll book it to what you call your private fund, private internal grants fund, which is 25. State grants is 21, but to 25 is where a lot of this revenue went last year.
We book it in the other revenues fund
The other revenue
first,
fund,
and
fine.
then we offset
Okay.
to the general fund
So
when.
that's 25, thank
Right.
you.
Thank you. So on to item C. Now, item C is the executive summary, and several of those items will come up also when we go through the detailed pages. But if, Dr. Title, do you have any comments that you want to make on the executive summary? And this time I'll start with Mrs. Gerber and go around the circle another way.
All right, so we're going to stay on 35 maybe, just as the overview. And I want to point out that there is, the numbers are the same, but I believe, Doreen, this is where we had a difference in the percent of the increase attributable to each of these major objects, right?
Right.
So the PowerPoint number is slightly different from the numbers in here. It's a quirk of the formula. So basically, the story is still the same. You saw the benefits piece, which is 1.5 points on this budget, right? And there's a actual savings in there that's offsetting, which is that pension number went down. Would that be even worse? Then we've got the salaries, and the salaries are, as I described to you, include all the ins and outs that are in there. So really, those two are where all the action is, and the rest of it is in number 9, which is basically a utilities account for all intents and purposes. So all the rest of it is pretty much flat. So that's what really makes up your 3.29, or my 3.29%. And I don't think I'm going to go through all the rest of the pages. I think we'll just let people ask questions at this point. You may want to spend the time on the staffing part, that's probably where, it's 100 million of the budget, so maybe I want to start there on 36 and 37. That's just a suggestion. We've
So,
already covered the next page pretty carefully, so.
Okay, so pages 34 through 55, but maybe the focus should be on pages 36 and 37. Mrs. Gerber, any questions?
Yeah, I did have one on page 36. It's number 133, the staff replacement. It says reduction to the budget for the anticipated replacement of higher paid senior staff with lower paid new hires. Anticipated non-certified turnover is now included. I just was wondering if you could give a little more information on that in terms of the number and just,
All right.
okay.
So
Thanks.
there are two essentially turnover accounts, for lack of a better way to put it. The one you're referencing are non-retirement certified staff turnover and all non-certified staff turnover. So this does not account for certified staff turnover. What we do is certified staff turnover, and the number we're using this year, Ann, is I think 14? 14. For certified retirements, we estimate, believe me, it's becoming an estimate. Not arbitrary, but it's an estimate of 14. What we do with those accounts is we take our best stab at 14 individuals in the system that, and we take their actual salaries down by $35,000. That's sort of built into the 101 account already. Okay. And the reason we took that down is that looking at the demographics of the teaching population, after this past year, we think we've pretty much seen the peak. There's not that many people left who are actually eligible. So while we were way under in terms of our estimate, we're really nervous about going any higher than this right now. Ann's nervous at 14. But that's built in. Okay, so that's built into the 101 account. You won't see that anywhere specifically, so we just tell you that we're doing that. This is other turnover, these are, for example, teacher halfway through the year goes out on an unpaid leave of absence for the second half of the year. We'll fill that position with a substitute. They get paid a lower rate than the teacher that went out. It could be a very experienced teacher that goes out. Substitutes get paid substitute rate, although as a long-term sub, you get paid a lot more. And, you know, there's enough of that happens that historically we've hit that number of $460,000. And in previous years, we had never budgeted for any non-certified staff turnover. It had just been a bonus to the budget. And this past year, we took the number from 350 to 460 on account of the fact that historically we had about 110,000 in savings of non-certified staff turnover, paraprofessionals, secretaries, custodians, and so forth. So that's how it's been done here. It's counterintuitive to see a negative number in the budget, but that's where that comes from. And it also could reflect teachers. We don't have a lot of this, but somebody who just leaves, say they move, and they're replaced by a lower paid teacher, then that would be included in staff replacement because they didn't actually retire, right? All right, I think that's all the nuances to it. What did I forget? Ann? That's it? Doreen, is that right? Okay.
Okay. Ms. Cornell, any questions on this section? No? Mr. Patton?
All right, let's go for the hard math question first. On lines 101, 103, this is where I'm math confused, I guess. So if we have, on page 37, so if we have an increase, for example, in teaching staff of $538,000, but we had a 3% contractual increase, that's not 3%. So what am I not seeing?
All right, so this is a budget-to-budget comparison. All right? So when you have, for example, $700,000 of
That's what I was
retirements that you weren't expecting, then your actual number that you're building this 3% on is $700,000 lower.
So that's what I'm saying. So if I
It's
add
right.
$700,000 to that number,
Right.
that should...
Well, and then there's other pieces to it as well. But that's essentially, you're
It's
looking
never
at
that
budget
easy.
to budget, not budget to actual.
Okay.
Okay? And we've had proposed, yes, I'm sorry. Budgeted, this is budget to budget. Budget to actual would be a different figure, and that's back in the detail.
Right.
So that's where you pick it up. The other thing is that this includes additional positions or reductions in positions. Now, on the teaching staff side and the certified support staff side, we're pretty close to a wash, as I showed you in the PowerPoint. So that doesn't really have an impact, but if we were adding positions, that would also impact this, or subtracting positions. But the biggest difference here is the fact that the actual expense for these accounts is much lower than the budgeted expense. That's really the answer.
Okay.
Doreen, Ann?
Okay.
Could I ask a
Makes sense.
clarifying question? Sure. The 538,000, a 1% increase for that line from the budget of 68 million would be 689,000?
That's correct.
So the 538 is actually less than a 1% increase. So I'm not sure what your...
No, that's where I started with the math, and
Yeah.
that's why I
The
got confused, and
certified
I was wondering how the
support- yeah,
700 figured in
The certified
there.
support staff, which is where we're adding paraprofessionals for the needs of individual students.
No, they're not there.
No, that's different.
That's different.
That is a higher percentage, but on the teaching staff line, it's less than 1%?
It is
Am I
less than
correct?
1%. And the other factor in this, I tell you guys weren't on this with me, that if we get additional grant money in next year that's being applied to salaries above and beyond what we're getting this year, then that would also affect the bottom line. So, for example, in addition to the excess cost grant, we did see a bump, and we think it will continue from at flat into next year. This is an example of such a thing. In the federal IDEA money, we got a bump there. If you got a bump in a grant, then you can go in now and pay more of somebody's salary, and that will help the bottom line as well. So if you've got increases in grants that are being applied to salaries, that also helps you.
Okay. Next up is the paraprofessional line, 113.
That's what Phil was referring to.
Right. So, I guess my confusion is the line 113 versus, versus line 107. So in line 113, since that contract is not been negotiated yet, again, those, as you've said here, increases are budgeted in the wage and benefit reserve as normal. So my question on the line 107, so now that, I'm sorry. Yes, 105, sorry. It's I need to read glasses, folks. In your description, you've said that, they're in the rejected agreement, provided a salary increase of 2.65%. So is that in that line, the projected, or the increase that was negotiated that is now in arbitration? Actually, the increase is that part is not in arbitration.
Yeah, well, that arbitration hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So we don't know what's on the table there. But for budget purposes, because it happened so late, and we had already done this budget and added the 2.65% into all their lines, that to back it all out and put it in wage and benefit reserve was just a fruitless exercise. So in that case,
it is in there.
It's in there. Had there been no agreement at all, and the whole thing was going to arbitration, and it was completely up in the air, as you are with the paraprofessionals, then we would have put it in wage and benefit reserve. But in this case, it's fully in the 105, that contract. 113, it is not in.
It's not.
Correct.
Okay, that was my
Yes.
confusion.
Yes, and that's completely understandable.
Really want to
because-
open up the
Right.
health insurance topic again, but is the health insurance savings or not savings from the administrator's contract, is that also, because again, you didn't back it up, is that in here or is that not in here?
It is not included in the health insurance projection.
It is not.
Correct.
So that was able to be backed out, but this...
Yes. We
okay.
backed that out because we got one more update from Aon before we put the budget together.
Okay.
And that's a lot easier than changing one number than backing out 38 salaries.
Fair enough.
And when we're under the gun to get this done. So that's how it ended up happening.
Okay. That's all I've got.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
If you don't mind, can I back up to page 35? So I was just starting from, before I got to the salary specifically, I was just looking at the big picture numbers. So and correct me if I'm wrong, so when I look at the staff salaries and benefits together, and, I guess this is including a lot of the other groups as well, but I keep thinking that the increase from last year to this proposed, from this last year to the proposed year, it's supposed to be about 1.7%. Is that right? Isn't that what we had discussed and was reflected as part of the contract negotiations, that it would be a net increase between benefits and salaries for the teachers, which are about, 80% of the salaries and benefits in here? So like 79 point something, so about 80% is fixed costs associated with the teachers' salaries and benefits. So if I was doing the math on that, which I tried to do, and our total budget is up 3.3%, about that, right, 3.29%, on the whole 160, and 80% of that should be up 1.7% for the teachers. Am I doing the math right to say that the balance, which is the other 20% of the budget, is then up 9.88%? So close to 10%, the other balance of the budget has to be up close to 10%. So
Well,
that together with
there-
the 80% at 1.7 gives us the 3.3 growth overall?
Well, not quite.
Okay, 'cause I was trying to do fixed versus variable.
I understand. So here's the thing.
Yeah,
On the benefit side,
yeah.
the $800,000 in savings on the teacher contract, when you net that number off of the teacher salary increase, gets you to about 1.7%. Does not account for the fact that you're dealing with a 9% trend. So your benefits as a whole are going up, double digits. You're saved a bit by what the teachers say, but it doesn't reduce that line. As you can see, we're still going up $2.4 million in benefits even with the savings. So had there not been $800,000 in savings in the teacher's contract, we'd be up another half point on this budget.
So what is the total fixed cost? So the salaries were up 3%, and then the total benefits were up what?
Well, salaries, are you talking about teachers?
Yeah, because I want to do that fixed, like we're saying 80% of the contract is fixed. Right,
80% of the
our
contract is
budget. I'm
fixed.
sorry, 80% of our budget is basically fixed costs.
Actually, it gets
associated
higher
with
than
the.
that.
Okay, it could be even higher than that.
I think it's closer to about 97% in my view. But, because I don't think you can do much with transportation, you can't do much with tuition, you can't do much with, you got to heat the buildings.
Before I even get to that,
Right.
we just dealt with the contract first, so I kind of want to back into what everything outside of the teachers' contracts and benefits has to equate
Right.
to get us to the rise of the 3.3.
All the other lines in the budget, outside of salary and benefits, are going up in the aggregate, the equivalent of about, 0.6%. So just take salary and benefits out of the equation for the time being. All the other lines, if you add them all together, 3 through 11, right? You're in the vicinity of, half a percentage point. Okay. So that, essentially, those are all pretty close to flat. Your benefits are fixed, and you can see they're the biggest driver here.
So if
So
I were to
the
back
benefits
into,
are going up a lot. The benefits are going up 9.7% overall. So you're right, that's a big number.
okay, so the teachers' wages, or not just the teachers' wages, but the wages and
Yes.
benefits for all the employees are going up 3% plus another, what did you say, 9.8%?
Well, they're not going up. The teacher's contract has a 3% increase in it, including the increment, but it doesn't turn into a 3% impact on our budget or even on that line because of what I talked to Mr. Patton about, which is the actual is actually lower than the budget number. So the net on all the salaries, including the contracts that are settled and unsettled, including adding positions, subtracting positions, and so forth, that line is going up about 2%.
But the wages and benefits together, I want to
Yeah,
take out
all
that
right, so
fixed
wages and
cost.
benefits together
Yeah.
are going up, are hitting the budget for 2.86%. Right, the 1.37 and the 1.49.
So if I say 2.86% increase for that 80%, is it 80%?
It's 120 million of 160.
It's about 80% of the budget. I think based on these numbers over here, if I
75.
take the salaries and benefits over the total, it comes
Gotta
up
do
to
my fractions. Least common denominator.
0.7935,
12/16.
something like that.
The pie chart is, got it down, right?
Yeah, I think it's 0.7935.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, 63 for salaries and 16 for benefits.
Yeah, so it's about 80%.
I knew that pie chart was there for a
Yeah,
reason.
exactly.
Okay.
So if you're saying that the 80% is at 2.86, right?
No.
No.
That's a
No.
percent of the
Whole
total.
budget.
That's
No,
a
so I just want to know what
yeah.
the increase is for that 80%.
All right. So we can do that math. I can't do it off the top of my head. Somebody can do that.
Yeah, because in my mind, I kept thinking that that was representative of the 1.7% we had talked about in salary and benefits for this last year. That was kind of in my mind of what that was supposed to be. Based on our conversations, that was where I was going. And now I guess my understanding is that, in fact, it wasn't really 1.7, it's 1.7 plus some other, right, increase in benefit costs.
Yeah, the other benefit costs were not factored into that. Those were going to happen either
So
way.
now I want to see what the entire benefit plus salary package increase actually is.
Right, so if the budget number, you'd add the 99, 232, 559, right? Plus the 23, 949, 135, that's your base. And then add the proposed together, and divide it by the base, and that's your percent increase in those two lines combined. I just can't do it off the top of my head.
So
I'd love to try.
I was just asking you to confirm
Okay,
that.
we can do the
because-
math on that.
Yeah, because what I want to do is I want to back into what that other 20% should be then, because it seems like it would be a very large number.
Well, the only really large
Unless,
number.
of course, the wage and benefits number is huge, because
Well, I mean, the math all works, it's all on the page. Just, if you just want to take those two numbers, add them together, look at the difference. Right, so it's, yeah, the increase over the budget on salaries is 2,129,931. Add 2,325,688, right? Yeah, I mean, are you on page 35 there?
I am.
Okay, so the increase on the staff salaries is 2,129,931.
So you know what? Instead of us doing this now.
Yeah, okay.
What I'd like is as a request.
Yeah, we
I
can
would like to
just
get-
do the math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do the math, because I'd like to see what the actual fixed costs are for this budget. Because we keep saying that this 80% is fixed. I would like to know what that actual growth rate
Right.
was, if it's not the 1.7 that we had all been under, not everybody, I should say. I was under the impression the 1.7% was reflective, but clearly there's all these additional. So actually, the increase in wage and benefits for the staff is significantly more to the district than the 1.7. And I'd like to quantify just how much that is, so that then I can understand for the other 20%
Right.
of the budget, how much.
Yeah, the other 20% of the budget is
rises.
going up about $750,000 net. Because really, if you look at it, those two numbers come to about 4.4 million. The budget increase is 5.1 million.
Right.
It's about $750,000. All the other lines are going up $750,000, and basically, it's all in that line 9, operation and maintenance of buildings. All the other numbers basically net to zero. So that's what.
Right, so
that's
this
how it
just
works.
emphasizes the importance of the negotiated contract, because
Yeah.
it's driving our entire budget.
Well, the negotiated contract is helping our benefits side because we're able to subtract $800,000 off the estimate. What's really hurting us here is 9% trend on $30 million of expenses. That drives you up 2.7 just to start with. Before you're out of the box, you're 2.7 million up.
Right, but it just shows that the need to be more detailed on that part of it is probably pretty critical to our budget.
Well,
Right.
It's
So
a
we
big
call
piece.
it fixed, but it's variable. It's like every 3 years it's variable. So, okay, so that's my first question.
And can I just clarify that?
Yeah.
I presume that, that the contract discussion on one of our bargaining units, that our desire to improve world language has an impact on total salaries, our
Yes.
requirement to add paraprofessionals because of the individual needs of students, and has an impact on our salaries, and so the contract number that we were talking about doesn't take into account those budgetary needs. It was only contract 1 year to the other year.
So I guess when we do break these numbers out, it would be helpful to say additional FTEs or staff that's being added and the associated budgetary impact of that.
Yeah, and you'll see it in the detail,
Yeah.
in the back pages.
Okay, so, right. So that's okay for the breakout, correct? Is it okay to request that
Yeah,
breakout
yeah.
for a summary? Because I find flipping back and forth is not as efficient as us being all on the same page. Okay,
Any
so
other
that
questions
was-
that you want to ask?
Yep, so that was the first one. And then I guess my other, like I said, then we go back to page 37 that has all of the salary numbers. And clearly, this also must incorporate the increase in staff. But the numbers clearly are just, and some of these categories are much larger. You know, there's certified support staff, it's up 4.2%, school administration, 6.8. Maybe, I probably did it over the budget, over the proposed instead of the budget as the denominator, so it probably should be even bigger than what I'm saying, 6.81%. The other one was secretary clerical staff was up over 8%. The custodial staff was up over 9.5%. The support staff was up over 13%.
Yeah, so let me,
So the numbers look very
right.
big. And I guess I want to understand what that's coming from.
Right.
Increasing staff. For increasing staff,
Okay,
what's it for?
yeah, there's a couple things going on here. One is we had a number of contracts that settled this year and had major retro pay. So all of those, you may be looking at 3 years worth of an increase for a particular bargaining unit. That all gets lodged here, and it had been being carried in the wage and benefit reserve. So, in fact, we actually have a chart of all of that. Somebody can look up the page, and you'll see that there's a significant amount of retro in there. Secretarial, clerical staff, 3-year contract recently settled, 2% each year for 3 years. So that drives all, like 6% into that account because you're making up all that money right into that line. Whereas before, that line was pretty much staying flat, and the money was held over in wage and benefit. So it's not an actual increase, it's the effect of the retro. And the other is the
Can you just review that
custodial
retro?
staff.
So the retro treatment is such that you kind of fast forward all the whole expense, or what is it that you're saying exactly? If you could clarify.
Doreen, you want to try this?
For instance, the custodial contract was open, I think, for 3 years. So each year in the budget, we were carrying an old rate, like the 12-13 rate, because they hadn't gotten an increase over that period of time.
Right.
We were budgeting the increases in wage and benefit. So when you look at when they actually did settle, and they got an increase each year, which was paid out of either the wage and benefit reserve or the accrued salary account. When you look at budget to budget, it looks like a huge increase, but that's because you're comparing, in the case of the custodians, a 12-13 rate to a 15-16 rate.
So what you're saying is that the new rates that we negotiated became retroactive to prior years, and we're recognizing all that cost now.
Correct.
And so then what we're saying is that the new rates were somewhat, if not significantly higher than what we had originally budgeted.
No. If you look at page 140, you can actually see the whole data on it.
So did we not recognize any of the expense in priors? We did. We're just recognizing the incremental.
It's in a different place in the budget. That's what makes it different. It's sitting over in wage and benefit reserve as opposed to in the individual.
So there's just an offset, you're saying?
It's an offset, exactly.
And
The wage and benefit reserve is way down this year.
Yeah, and
because
can
we
I-
don't have too many unsettled contracts.
Can I clarify, the offset is the 258,597 negative?
Right.
Is that the offset
Right.
collectively? Yeah.
That's part of it, yeah.
But
That's
that
partly.
also overstates the salaries on the previous page by 258, because it's not 1 year's worth of increases, it's 3 years' worth of
Correct.
increases.
Right.
So that percent, that 1.7% that you're looking for, you're not going to find in this number until you back out the wage and salary
So
accrual, right?
Well, that, on the executive summary, though, that includes the wage and benefit reserve.
Right, you'd have to back that out to get the actual, back down to the contractual, year-to-year contractual increase.
I don't know, Doreen, is that right?
Yeah.
so
If I looked at the custodial line for 15-16, that 15-16 would have those 3 years' worth of increases in that line, that wage line,
Correct.
okay? So in order to actually get to what the 15-16 wage increase is, I'd have to back out 2 years of the wage accrual that was put in there.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
You got it.
so
So you can see the list of the settlements on page 140.
yeah.
They're all settled in pretty low numbers.
Can I ask if you could, because I think it's interesting to see the granular detail, if you could in fact back out the wage and benefit reserve or redistribute it amongst 101 to 129, so we can see what the net impact of the increase is across the different categories. What I want to see is really what the increase is for each of the respective areas broken out by wage and benefit. inclusive of the wage and benefit reserve back out. You see what I'm saying? So instead of lumping the wage and benefit as a final item, redistribute it amongst the 101 to 25.
No, it's something different. That's where
Yeah.
the current unsettled contracts are budgeted. I don't think you want to see that.
In public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
not what you're asking. You're asking for something that was budgeted in a previous wage and benefit number, not that number.
I just want to see what the new growth is.
The new what?
The new increases. I want to see what the new increase numbers are
Is it,
without the wage and benefit reserve impact on it.
so is it fair, it's kind of like the eliminations line where there's what items are in the 215, 216 number that really are covering prior years, and if you backed it out so that you've got a apples and apples comparison, not an apple and orange.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll see what we can do. Yeah.
Okay, so.
Is that
she'll-
clear?
She'll work on a memo that would get you that information.
All right, that would be great. It should just be a chart with the, yeah, you understand? Okay. Line 131 broken out amongst the categories above.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, I thought I saw Mr. Patton. Did you want to follow up on the line of questioning she was on?
No, I was going to
Okay,
attempt to
fair
clarify
enough.
something, but
Thank you.
I'm okay.
Can I move on to other board members, or do you
Yes.
have other questions?
Nope, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Llewellyn?
Hello.
You're up.
I'm back. Okay.
And while you're looking, recall that we are allowing the public to have discussion on the budget this year for the first time. And as I look at our pace, whether we'll get to Section D or not, and whether the board members want to pick a time that we say, okay, wherever we are, we'll finish so that we can go to the public. What is the board's desire, so I can give the public a sense of when they might be up? In terms of time frame that we end on? Huh? That might be a good question. How many members of the audience will want to speak so that we have a sense of the amount of time that might require? I have one, so I'm less nervous now. So, Mr. Llewellyn, continue.
Or more nervous.
That is not an impediment if suddenly there's a second or a third person, but I will say that if all of you come forward, then you're going to do a number on my timing, if you will.
Well,
Mr. Llewellyn.
since there's only one member of the public who wants to speak, should we ask her if she wants to speak now or at the end? Okay, so
C.
let's go to page 37.
Page 37.
Perfect. So if I start with 101 and 103, and we get back into the detail, I notice that we have an additional 6 teachers at Ward, and an additional teacher at Roger Ludlow High School. If I go and look at the enrollment is not up by any dramatic amount. So why are we adding 6 at Ward and 1 at Ludlow?
The Ward enrollment is actually going up, projected to go up, and next year be very close to Ludlow, and right now they have fewer teachers. So if we go over to that,
What page are you on, please?
yeah, I'm going to have to go look at the, I think it's under support information, I think.
I was trying to find it at page 129, but I can't find actuals. 129?
Yeah, the,
120? What's that 120? You're looking for teachers, you're looking for heads? For kids?
see what,
Kids.
can see that our projected enrollment at Ward next year is actually slightly higher than Ludlow. Ward is going to have a major influx into 9th grade. Say that again? 59 has the
we're looking at
FTEs
students
broken
here.
out, right.
Yeah, we're looking at students.
So it's the student count that's going up at Ward. The 9th grade count overall is going up. I mean, the high school enrollment overall is going up, but the bulk of it is at Ward, and that's why the teachers are being assigned to Ward. Now, I'll also say as a caveat that every year in the spring, we sit down with the two headmasters and we reallocate if it turns out that the course-taking patterns don't bear that out. And so the high school enrollment is going up in the aggregate. It's in the PowerPoint. I will find it in a second. And that is the reason why we need the additional teachers.
Okay, so if I look at the pink sheets from December 1st, we had a total of 3,017 kids in high school. That's 49 kids more next year than currently. And we're adding 7 teachers for 49 kids. That sounds kind of high.
Well, we have a 57 is the over the October 1, the October 1 enrollment and the projected number for next year. Also, some of those staff members, I believe, are in the special education arena and not the regular education arena, and Ward is adding the autism program, and so that accounts for quite a bit of it. So where was that page with all the ins and outs on it? But I think that's the biggest piece of it that's really not enrollment driven, but it's a new program because kids are moving up from the feeder schools into the high schools. Excuse me? 142. So if you look at, 142 certified staff additions, the biggest thing you've got there, high school special education teacher 2.0, that would be the program award.
Okay, because I
If you back that out, you're down to like, what, 4 or 5 teachers.
But you're down to 4 teachers for
Right.
40 kids.
Right, but they all take 7 classes, and, it's based on the projected enrollments that we expect and where we have classes that are crowded now and are going to need some relief. That's what our estimate is. Now, we refine that when we get the actual course-taking patterns, but that's what it looks like right now.
Okay, can I request, and I'll put this in writing to you, please, the number of students by section, by school, like was provided last year, because our enrollment projections every year going into the freshman year are less than projected because we've had this discussion before, the number of kids going off to magnets and other schools. So if we could see that, please, the way it was printed out of the system. So it's, English section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has, 28 kids, 26 kids, 22, whatever it is, so we can see that like was provided last year, please. Because I'm not sure the trend is up, and if we can use retirements and resignations to rebalance, that might be a really prudent thing to do when we've got a budget going up by, north of 3%. My next question.
So you'll
I'll put that
send
right.
that as an email
Yes.
so we're sure about the question that you asked.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And can you also add to your request the teachers, the number of teachers allocated to cover the classes? Because I know some teachers cover multiple classes, so to understand how that works.
Okay, so it'll be section by teacher. So my next question is related to,
And again, for the microphone.
sorry, my next question is related to Fitzgerald. We appear to be eliminating a teaching position and adding an administrator. So we're going to go from, we're dropping I'm doing this from memory, so excuse me, $91,000 and replacing that with a $131,000 administrator to oversee 8 teachers and, 40 or 50 children. Given that you could probably hit a golf ball from here to there, I'm not sure why I know last year it was given to an administrator here to oversee. I'm not sure that is an expense we necessarily need to incur either.
But let's have Andrea speak to that while we're there. This is at the Walter Fitzgerald campus. So we're proposing to replace a dean and 2 stipended positions and replace it with an administrator.
First, let me talk about the need for the position. The Walter Fitzgerald campus is a school, It is a school like any other. Yes, it serves fewer students, but we have students there who are highly at risk. And in my opinion, I believe those students, those families, and those teachers deserve instructional leadership on a full-time basis, not on a part-time at best or drop-in when you can basis. And that's what they've had for their entire career. And I think the expectations, our expectations for those students, and the community's expectations, and certainly the state and federal government's expectations for those students are ever increasing. So I believe that that population of kids needs instructional leadership to move that program forward, to allow those kids to achieve at the levels we hope and expect of them. That being said, if you look at on page 156, it starts on 155. I've also tried to build a case and make a case that I hope we can have a thorough discussion of for addressing technical assistance and leadership in the special education department to our 17 school sites. And while the decrease of a dean at the Walter Fitzgerald campus and making that an administrative position will also allow for a greater technical assistance from our secondary special ed coordinator, who currently is attempting to provide on-site technical assistance to the 2 comprehensive high school programs and provide instructional leadership at the Walter Fitzgerald campus. And quite frankly, she's spread too thin. And all 3 programs are getting less than they require, and the students in those programs whose needs are increasing, whose complexities are increasing, the students, the families, and the teachers are not getting the support they need to be able to do that. And I think that puts, that is a fiscal problem that we will face in terms of everything from legal fees to outplacements to unilateral placements and settlements, that I think we can do better. Rather than having someone who is just putting out fires whenever she can, running from place to place, to actually providing a higher level of technical assistance before the fire begins. And so this position at the Walter Fitzgerald campus will provide not only the instructional leadership that I believe the Walter Fitzgerald campus students deserve and teachers deserve, but will also increase the level of technical assistance and support to our 2 comprehensive high schools, which they desperately need.
Okay, and I guess I was not saying to eliminate the position. I was saying I would think a teacher who would be able to then reduce class size and spend more time with students might be more beneficial than another administrator. That was kind of my point.
Yeah.
I would respectfully disagree.
And Mr. Llewellyn, if you wanted to pursue that next Tuesday, put a proposal forward so that we'd know that you wanted to adjust the budget to accomplish your thought process.
Okay, thank you. Let's see.
I hope you get a chance, everyone, to look at 155 to see how understaffed we are in the Department of Special Ed and Pupil Services and leadership compared to districts in our area. And it had directly impacts the programming for kids and how well we can service kids and families.
Shall I move on while you're looking at the next thing and come back
Nope,
to you?
I was actually looking at what Dr. Teta was referencing. Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that. So under line 121, we have an instructional data analyst as a new position. And what is an instructional data analyst?
Tell me what page you're on.
Page 37.
Yeah,
Okay.
You're still back on, you're back on
Yeah, I'm
137.
coming back to the.
Yeah.
Yep.
And while Dr. Title gets to the page, you want to repeat your question?
Sure. There is, in section 121,
Yep.
there is the addition of a head called a technology support.
Information
And in the
technology
back-
support position.
Yep, in the back, it's referenced as a instructional data analyst.
Right, information technology position. I'll have Nancy talk to that position. That's the extra, it's the 1 point FTE for technology support, information technology support, or I don't know if Karen wants to talk to it, but that's in your bailiwick, where we're hurting in that area.
Mr. Llewellyn, can you tell me what the second page was you were referring to, the reference page?
It was back in the detail. I didn't write the page number. I should have, but I saw the position was defined as instructional data analyst. So it would be back, was that a 400?
What we're looking for is a position to add to the technology department that would assist us in handling many of the requests that we're getting through Infinite Campus for data analysis. We have an awful lot of data that we're collecting now, and what we're finding is that the demand for data to support a myriad of instructional requirements we're just not able to keep up with the demand. So that was really what that's all about.
And can you elaborate a myriad of instructional requests?
Curriculum leaders looking for analysis of grades, allocation, and assessments and student progress. We are using a product called Tableau that takes data out of Infinite Campus and allows us to manipulate it across a number of data elements. This helps them to confirm their hypothesis when they're trying to figure out how to improve instruction or the curriculum, what areas we're achieving well in, what areas we need to focus on. I know something we looked at in the fall was about the array of Ds and Fs and where they were focused so that the administrators could look at that data and drill down to figure out where they needed to put their resources, where the priorities needed to be. So things along those lines, as well as a whole bunch of other things that are more demographic.
And we're going to be collecting a lot more data for the district improvement plan. There's a ton of data points. A lot of it will have to come out of Infinite Campus, be sorted, put together,
Okay.
analyzed.
Yep, that
So
makes sense. The
I
descriptions
really
are
feel
helpful.
like
Thank
it
you.
will help us. It's laying the groundwork for what you saw earlier in the year in terms of, collecting data and then making it into usable, actionable, instead of just reports.
And do we ever use outside agencies to help kind of mine the data? Or do we do it all in-house?
The only thing I can say about that is there may be analysis done by a company that actually we procured or subscribed for an assessment. So, for example, there may be a test that's given across the district to a grade level, and they may, create bar charts and graphs based on whatever that particular product might be. But to the best of my knowledge, we're not using anybody outside for the kinds of analysis work that I was talking about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question related to
go
your
ahead.
Yeah, please.
So on that topic of data mining and processing and putting systems in place, I think I'd asked this question at the last session. Is there anything within the budget that allocates for compiling and sharing that progress that the teachers are interested in, taking that result, compiling it, and sharing it with the parents so that they can follow the progress of the students over the school year as well?
Academic question?
Yeah, Karen, do you want to handle that? I'm not quite sure I understand it. So I know we.
Shall I clarify? So, for example, for the iReady test, it's a progress exam that's taken,
Right.
I guess, 3 times a year. So as we get that data, it goes someplace. I know it's
Right.
people analyze it and figure out where they need to work with different students on what.
Yeah,
But I think that information also is like a progress report. And what's nice about it is that it's standardized and it's national. And at the end of the day, even though it's the first year that we're really using it, I think people are cognizant of that. But I think sharing that progress with the parents, of course, after the teachers have had a chance to look at it, and then you compile it and you share it so you can see how we've done versus the district versus the nation, and we can watch that progress together and see the areas that the kids need improvement, where they need to help. Like it or not, parents are supplementing students, and if they see that there's a weakness within the students' repertoire, they want to be able to help using outside sources beyond. And if we're going to do that assessment anyways, I think it would be a helpful resource for the public to compile it. And is that cost being incorporated in our systems analysis?
Okay, I think I understand now. I think that being a new test, I think we're struggling with what the best way is to communicate those results to parents. I think some of the standard reports that have come out of iReady are not very user-friendly. They're pretty complicated, and we weren't ready to just run them off and send them out. So I think that's something we're still working on that. Obviously, when we give assessments in the classroom of any kind, we want to share the results of those assessments with the parents. And this being the first year through it, this is a learning year for us on that. So I don't know if anybody in the instructional office wants to comment on that, but I know that that's a work in progress. And we have, you know, for example, when we have Blue Ribbon, we used to share those results, you know, with the parents, and we would still want to do that. I just think it's been a tough sledding with the new assessment. So, does anybody want to jump in on that from instruction?
I would just make one comment, is that one of the beautiful things about iReady is that it's online. So unlike the Blue Ribbon, which is, you know, probably very manual and, you know, a little more cumbersome, iReady should be able to, you know, kind of spit out some reports, maybe not in a way that we think is perfect, but if we could maybe somehow reformat that, or is that on our agenda of pipelines to develop
On the
the
agenda
technology?
pipeline.
Can I
Yes.
Yes, it
interrupt
is.
your questioning? We're moving along, and that one person that wanted to make a comment, do you want to come forward, and then we'll go back to our regular business? Please come forward. I saw that you were putting your coat on and
Thank you.
didn't want you to leave.
You know, trying to put
Please do.
everything
No,
out
no,
of order.
please do.
My apologies.
And state your name and address, please.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Reigate Road. Again, my thanks to the chair for indulging me before I leave this evening. I want to congratulate you, which I know is not always the easiest thing for me to do, and I apologize. But it was very nice to see the consultation between the other boards in the town and the Board of Ed all coming together, you know, for the good of the town. I mean, we all are the town. My comment to you all is, I heard a round of commentary happen again, which I've heard over the last 10 years I've been coming, which is it's the town side or the board side or the board side or the town side or different silos. And my concern is, yes, I acknowledge the fact that at one point the Board of Ed covered the town. And now, after what I look as is that this board, the minority or majority or whoever, did raise the concern that we were going to end at zero. As we now see, that was probably not the best way to go. And while I appreciate the 9% actuarial at $2.7 million, it's still really not covering the bottom. I appreciate what the chair of the Board of Finance commented, which is it's a 20-year period. But this is not the trend we should be going in. It shouldn't be they cover, now you cover me, we go back and forth. I'd like each part, and I will comment at the Board of Finance along these exact same lines. Everybody needs to put their house in order for the benefit of the town, for the benefit of the taxpayers. We have to start everyone taking responsibility for it. I mean, the Board of Finance chair made it very clear. The OPEB piece is not looking good, and if the other 2 points don't come to their conclusions and keep it on the plus, you know, we're not all going to be looking very good. I want to remind the board that 3 years ago, the same gentleman who sat here did come asking for 2 times IBNR and an MOU. That's been removed. I'm hearing now tonight just IBNR. My view is that's a big bonus. So let's try to compensate with a little extra cash. I don't want to use the taxpayers' money, but we need to build a better buffer so we don't find ourselves with these negative numbers on the bottom of page 159. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mrs. Lou McCormick, I think you still had the floor? No, Mr. Llewellyn had the floor. And did you get your question responding to him?
Yeah, so I asked about the iReady pipeline, and the other one I'll remind you of is the rubric for the new progress reports that are being sent out. And is that part of our technology budget to now post them online so that parents can understand what the M's, the E's, and the P's mean? Because I understand there's a very specific rubric with guidelines, and that would be very nice to have that available to the public so that they are aware as to what
Yeah,
it
I don't
all
think that's a
means.
budget issue. You know, I don't think that's a cost item for us. I don't
It's
know
not
whether.
a cost.
Yeah.
So why do we not post it?
I don't know. Does anybody want to comment on that? Mike, do you want to come up? I don't know.
So the rubrics are akin to the iReady process we engaged in. We had to write them, develop them,
work with teachers on them, and then check on our progress. So one of our resistance not to publish them right away is because we were editing and changing them. So it wouldn't cost any additional money to post or share them. But I would want to check with the curriculum leaders to make sure that
Yeah.
they feel confident.
And I would
they're
say
ready
that,
to share.
at the end of the day, if we need to edit them, I don't think the public would,
Oh,
I think
that's
just
not a grammar issue. That's when I talk about edit. When we set up a rubric, we want to make sure that the rubric is a fair rubric in terms of monitoring progress for our students.
I understand that, but the students are already being judged based on that rubric. So if they're already receiving progress reports based on a rubric, we need to understand what these reports represent. And even if we change it for the next set of standards, it would be nice to then share those sets of standards as opposed to never sharing what these grades mean.
That's not what I'm suggesting. What I suggested was that when we feel that they're ready, then we share them because we feel that they're confident. What we tried to avoid was sharing them and then people have them, and now we've altered them and changed them, and people come back with the old ones, and we have this awkward conversation. I thought my child was being graded on this, and we've changed it.
Oh.
I'm not suggesting that we want to hide them. What I'm suggesting is we want to make sure that they're fully vetted
Right.
and at a point where they're ready to share.
I totally appreciate that. I just mean once the kids have been graded, they've been graded based on some rubric.
Correct, and right now, all of that's handled at a parent conference, where that student work samples are shared with parents to be able to demonstrate how your child's progressing.
Yeah, it's not as crystal clear as that rubric, though.
Quick follow-up,
we're
if I may,
getting
while you're here,
into,
before you leave, please.
I'll just leave you with that
Yeah.
comment that it would be helpful for the community to understand.
Yes, we're getting into viewpoints as opposed to budgets. Back to Mr.
just to-
Llewellyn?
Based on the current budget, when do you anticipate being ready? So when do you plan on sharing? When will you be at that point where you're comfortable editing?
Well, I would feel more comfortable after I talk to the curriculum leaders. I would hate to make that judgment without consulting them.
Okay, so you'll be able to have an answer for us hopefully at the next meeting?
Hopefully.
Perfect, thank you. Eileen, are you set?
Anything else, Mr. Llewellyn?
Absolutely, we've only
Yeah.
started. We're on page 37, right? And we're supposed to go, according to your agenda here, through...
We're still on item C.
Correct. So we've got a few pages ahead of us. So let me see here. Where is it? Do we? So we have. Say, I'm on page. Sorry, 45. Student transportation.
Okay.
So we have a net savings of $102,000, which, is it fair to assume is fuel savings? So offset, you said, by the 2.5 increase?
There's two parts of that. One is the fuel savings, and the other is additional excess cost reimbursement being assigned to that account.
And what's that, please? The excess cost reimbursement?
That was back in Mr. Fatabean's pages that he asked about.
Okay.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry, yes, from the
Right.
state.
Yeah, it's the state
Yes.
money.
I was
Right,
thinking
right.
busing as in for the bus, use of the bus themselves. Got
Oh,
it.
no, it's the state excess costs. So if we have out-of-district placements for kids.
Right.
And we're
Okay.
getting reimbursement
Yep, I
for
got
those
that one.
costs, then those get assigned in there as well. The fuel savings is in the vicinity of what, Doreen?
gotta be
I'm guessing
huge.
it's around 100 grand,
And
200,000 gallons at 50 cents a gallon, something like that.
Yeah, 80,000, something like that.
80,000, 100,000 in fuel, so the balance is excess cost and.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Page 47. So we have conferences and travel for new mandates. And I didn't know if we had any insight into that, because that's $250,000. We also have professional development and curriculum writing, which is $600,000.
Right.
I didn't know if we could possibly get some understanding as to specifically how that money is going to be spent, because that is, between the two of them, quite a significant number.
Which one?
Line 319 and 321.
Right, so 321, that's, so program implementation is broken out on page 152.
152.
And the piece of that that's professional development The biggest part in that 319 is professional development.
Right.
Okay, and the biggest thing in there is professional development related to some of the new mandates, specifically the dyslexia mandate. But that's a big piece of it in there, and also we're going to be doing some additional professional development on teaching in the block for the high school as we're going to that. Also going to be spending time on a number of the other programs that are listed over to the right under the detail where it says professional development. And then there's another piece. I would say in the special ed arena, Andrea, you had a couple of different things going on there. I think maybe you want to talk about that a little bit. I know the biggest one was the dyslexia mandate, but there was more than that.
Right.
That's part of it. That's really the biggest piece of it is additional special ed training.
The two issues in special education that are driving the request for additional professional development is, as Dr. Title said, one, the new dyslexia legislation, both in terms of we need to work with our staffs in K through 12 on consistently implementing evidence-based practices for students with dyslexia, and that's going to be a huge professional development initiative. You don't do that with a one-day workshop. You do that with ongoing job-embedded professional development across multiple years. So you're going to see that for the next 3 to 5 years as we get each and every one of our special education teachers K through 12 to a level of expertise in reading instruction for students with dyslexia. We do hope that that work will also engage our ELL teachers, so we can also work with ELL students,
Right.
but for the purposes of this, I'm really talking about students with dyslexia. Additionally, this year, and you'll see it in a couple of places in the budget, the Wechsler Intelligence Scales for Children is being revised again. That is it is a major gold standard resource we use in comprehensively evaluating our students with disabilities, and is being reauthorized. So this is a really good opportunity for us to work with our school psychologists on raising the level of comprehensiveness and the level of science we're using in the overall evaluation of children with disabilities to drive instructional programming. So those are the two big silos, if that's our new word we're going to use tonight, in addressing the professional development needs within the Department of Special Ed for this coming year, for what we're asking
That's
for.
really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just as an aside on 327, while we're on the page, I am a little curious as to what the students pay for color printing, because
Which page are you referring to?
327
47.
47?
Oh, 47. 327 is the object code. Sorry, I didn't move. I'm still on the same page.
Yeah. My book stops at 174, so I was trying to figure out where three...
Yeah. Yep.
What was the
It's
question?
something we should. I would be interesting to have broken out what we spend on color printing, because I see a lot of stuff coming in color. I know that's exceptionally expensive. So if we get tight toward the end of next week, that would be a good one to look at.
It's actually an account we've been reducing.
No, I know it is.
Yeah.
But I know that's an area that's growing, because I've heard kids in the library have, unfettered access. Let's see. We also have, on the next page, page 49, we've got supplies, books, materials, and instructional supplies and materials. And between breaking down the two, I see some of it has to do with world language. Some of it is the WISC, which I think we
Yes.
just referred to. WISC is Wessler, right? Yes.
Yeah,
So
Whiskers, that's about an $80,000 number.
Okay, and that's in 01, so that's, okay. And then, how much is the world language? Do you recall off the top of your head or not?
Yeah, we have
16?
that.
I don't know, I don't remember it, though.
The world language includes more than just the 6th grade. That is levels 10 and 20 of world language in 3 languages, right?
3 languages. 154. Okay, so, how much?
The breakdown on the cost of world language is on page 154.
Thank you.
Well, but that may only be the grade 6. Yeah, okay, yeah, the world language, 152, world language, the text and materials for world language is $215,200.
Okay, so that is the whole change, I would
That's the
assume.
whole
our
textbooks
instructional.
for French, Spanish, and Latin, levels 10 and 20. That includes the 6th grade, because that's where level 10 would begin.
Okay, so that accounts for our increase. And then the base,
Yes.
what, do we have some basic subjects in there that make up the other $750,000? Page. Thank you.
On page 152, you just go down the text and materials.
Oh, yep, I got it.
You
Perfect,
see it
thank
there.
you.
It's broken out in gory detail.
Clearly, I didn't make it there.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
the other big piece, I guess the only other piece for those not following along as home gamers, is the Algebra 2 texts that we deferred on in this budget, pending the selection of a book. And so we're carrying that number over in the event that the teachers find a book they want to use, then we have budget money to buy it. So really, if you get down to it, it's world language and Algebra 2 are probably the two biggest pieces there, and we're continuing our work in language arts at the elementary level, but world language is the big nut this year.
Thank you. And then on the following page, 1551, if you could give us a little color, please, on utilities going up by
A lot.
quite a bit.
Yeah, that's basically rates, electrical rates, and natural gas. Natural gas rate is going up budget to budget by 32%. And that's a big number. So what happened there was, and the town does this purchasing for us.
Okay.
I think, just hypothesizing that when Twig in the purchasing department pulled the trigger last year, they got a really good rate on natural gas. And almost immediately after they locked that in, which benefited us this year, the rates started going through the roof. Natural gas prices have been going up quite a bit. When they went to lock in, that was the best they could do. And electricity is the same issue. Our consumption of that, both electricity and natural gas, has been actually going down. We've been doing some efforts in conservation, and when we do renovations, we do see a savings in those areas. When we replace boilers at North Stratfield, they're going to use less natural gas than the 1964 boilers, and if we replace the ones at Jennings from 1966, we'll see a decrease there, but you can't overcome these rate increases.
Right. And are they?
And those, really, if you get right down to it, those are the two biggest numbers.
Okay, can I interrupt? We're closing in on the 11 o'clock hour. I still have 3 board members that wish to ask some questions. Are we almost ready to move on to another board member? Or?
Sure, I was just going to ask if.
And if you do
we're
have
locked in.
questions, you could send them in and we could get them answered for next Tuesday. But go, finish up if you would.
We have a lot to do for next Tuesday.
That's fine. Is that an annual number, though?
Is
So
what
do
an
we
annual
lock that
number?
in for the year, the gas and the electric?
I think we're
Just to
locked in
finish up on
for
that?
the full fiscal year, right?
Fiscal year.
On those. Yeah, she's bought out quite a bit. Sometimes they're only locked in through halfway through the year, and then she'll say, estimate the back half of the year at this number. But in this case, and I think that's also true for the diesel fuel, correct? That's locked in
Yes.
all the way through June of 16. So I think
Okay.
those are all actual.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we spent a lot of time on these utilities, but we'll double check. But I believe we're locked in through the end of the fiscal year on this. I don't think there's any estimating.
Okay.
Okay.
Move on.
I've got questions on capital, but we can come back to it.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
I'm having to adjust on the fly here. A lot of my questions have been asked, so I've got to kind of regroup. I'll probably end up sending most of that in. One question I did have regarding technology on page 53, I'm assuming that this is keeping us, we haven't had to make any sacrifices in terms of pursuing the technology plan that we'd had, because I'm not seeing the details on page 53.
The details are in here. Nancy wrote up a very nice narrative. Yeah, it's page 160, 161, on the capital side of things anyways. So it's pretty specific as to what we're doing there.
So I guess my
You can always use more, but, this number, while you bring it up, I do want to make a point, because people will look at it and say, oh my God, it's going down year over year. And I've made a huge commitment to technology and have resisted any cuts to the technology budget since I've been here, so that we can stay on track with our 3-year plan and catch up. But if you go back 2 years, the number was about 1.1 million. The reason it went up so much last year was that we had to put extra money in for a matching grant for the state, which was a bump of about $400,000. And the matching grant has been matched. And any future state grants that come out, we have enough money in here to meet our match requirements. So we're bringing it back a little bit, but I also told Nancy that if this budget gets cut down the road, that I would not be recommending any further reductions in this account. So I feel comfortable where we are with it. She feels comfortable where we are with it. But sure, could you use another $1 million? Absolutely. But we have to be, we have to carry this whole thing in our operating budget, and we can't bond it. So we're just trying to stay on top of it.
Another question?
Can't read my writing anymore.
Want me to move on to?
Pass for right now while I try to figure
You can
this out.
pass. Mr. Fattabine? Nothing more. Nothing more. Mr. Convertito?
Page 43. Can we get a breakout of accounts 305?
You use the mic, John.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Can we get a breakout of account 305 and account 315? I mean, rentals have doubled, is that correct? On athletic facilities?
This is a artifact of the removal of the $56,000 for pay to participate.
All right, so that's 48,000 plus, so the.
And there's some other rentals going up, but that's the bulk of it.
Can we get a breakdown of the rental?
Yeah, we have that.
Facilities that we have?
Yes.
So it's.
I see
it's-
Mrs.
it's
Munsell making
It's
a note.
17,000.
So it's
yeah.
17,000,
It's
right.
17,000.
Right.
Yeah, I think what is happening there, looking at it, Jim, we had to take another rental, didn't we, for one of the teams? It got split. Was it swimming? Boys swimming. I think boys swimming, we couldn't do a co-op anymore, so we had to rent an additional facility. My guess is that's the answer to that question, but we will double check on that. Does that sound about right, Mr. Coyne? Yeah.
Will I
Yeah.
then see a so that was the additional on the athletic support staff on one of the high schools? Was there another coach then added?
No, the team exists this year. Was there an additional coach added, was the question. Not ringing a bell.
If we can just
Okay.
check that.
Yep.
Okay.
But the biggest piece of that is when we put the,
So
we put the pay to participate against the rental costs.
So but we added a team.
We added a rental, right? We'll check. I don't want to size.
Yeah, if we
Or the
just-
rental went up or something.
Yeah, if we-
Right. They had to be two separate teams, so we had to add a rental, is the answer.
Does-
Or
does-
boys swimming, right?
Does that get you the answer, or do you want something more detailed, Mr. Convertito?
We'll double check it for
We'll
you.
double check
Okay.
it. And-
Yeah,
and-
I don't
They'll
think- that's
double
not a-
check and get
That's not
back
a
to
big
us.
hunt.
And
Okay.
305 as well.
Okay, 305, where are you? Let me just,
I assume that's legal fees?
Yes.
yes.
Are we going to break down on that? Redacted?
Updated like last year?
Yeah, you could see the history in there. It's just in the book. And we've historically overexpended that account. And increasing it by 75,000 doesn't even close the full gap. But, so we're just trying, that's an example of just trying to bring our budget in line with our anticipated expenses. We've been continually over in that line. And it's kind of like time to stop pretending it's just going to go down.
Is that it, Mr. Convertito? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, did you want to, is there another question there that you found that you want to ask?
I'm going to sort this out later.
You're going to sort that out later, Mr. Llewellyn. I think you were also,
Yeah, I had asked the software question before. I'll just send it in.
you'll send that in, okay? Mr. Patton, you wanted to ask another question.
I was under the, I guess, naive impression that when we started going around here, that we were kind of just going section by section and going that
Yes,
way
we
instead
are.
of the
We're
whole
still
shebang.
basically on 3455. Just that some, excuse me.
But the subsection. So I do have actually a bunch more. I will try and keep this brief. Several questions were already answered. Thank you, Mr. Convertito. I'm sorry. I thought I just
So
had
while
it right
Mr. Patton is looking, I'll once again ask if anybody has changed their mind and from the public and wanted to speak. If not, I'll assume that we've covered the public comment part of this building, this agenda, and stay with the board. Is there anybody out there that wishes to speak? If not, Mr. Patton, have you found your question?
Page 47, on the lines 319 and 321 in terms of conference and travel and professional development. In the breakdowns on page 150, whatever, 152, I think, there wasn't a lot of detail in terms of the new high school schedule and the professional development that the 100-plus teachers are going to need to learn how to teach a double period. Would that be in these two line items, or is that, in other words, where would we see that in the budget?
Right. We have a general professional development account that we can use here that's listed on page 152 as $105,000, and the teaching in the block is part of that larger number. Again, the increase in that is not, unfortunately, it breaks up to conference and travel, which is probably not a great descriptor now that I'm looking at it, because people think we're going to take $77,000 worth of travel. It's really all in professional development, and it's pretty much all in the special ed professional development, the increases. We listed a few of them in there. I don't know if there's any more detail anywhere from instructional folks about the breakdown on the PD.
I guess the overall question is,
We have enough.
What it sounds like is we're using the existing budget to do this training. Does that impact any other kind of training that we might do instead?
Oh, that's going to be the major focus, at the high school level. Will be teaching in the block. We've actually started it this year, and a lot of it is not necessarily sort of paying somebody to come in to lecture to the staff about how to not lecture for 2 periods. More of it is a lot of staff going out to other schools that are teaching in the block and going out on visits and learning from other schools that are teaching in the block successfully. So those aren't necessarily high-cost items in terms of hitting the PD account. If we do need to bring some professional expertise in, that is the account that we would use it from. I don't know if Dr. Boyce or Mrs. Sparks want to address that issue in any more detail.
I mean, in general, that's kind of what I was thinking. Is like, okay, if we have to send, because it was explained to us that's going to happen a lot. That's great. We want to send teachers out to observe how this is done elsewhere, which would require substitutes and whatnot. So that costs money.
The substitutes would be in a different account, though, probably.
Okay.
Correct? Yes. So if we have to hire subs for somebody because they're out on PD, that's in the sub account, although it's really a professional development expense.
Okay.
Go ahead. Dr. Boyce is going to give us a little more detail.
In the last few years, I'll note that a large part of this account was spent on the teacher evaluation process and bringing teachers up to par with the work on Marzano and other things. So that's now, we no longer need to fund that at the same level. So we've shifted to a large part of this. There's a number of things that go into this account, but the professional development for teaching in the block, which we're starting this year, we're starting on February 13th. We'll have several professional development days next year. We have one in August, in November, and February. We have whole entire days that we can use to continue this work. And we're really trying to respond to what the teachers tell us they need and the administrators tell us they're seeing a need for. So if we have to bring in a speaker or consultants to help teachers specifically, we have the money to do it. But I can't tell you exactly what we're going to do yet because I want to see how the need develops over time. And after February 13th, I think we'll have probably a better idea of what we need to do to continue the work next year.
Okay.
Other questions, Mr. Patton? Shall I move on to Mrs. Lou McCormick while you're looking at
Sure.
the pages? Okay, Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I have two questions. One regarding transportation,
Which page?
page 45.
Mhm.
So, I guess my question is regarding the number of buses that are budgeted. Is that number preset, or are we contractually obligated for, what was it, 5 years or what have you, to the number of buses, or can that flex?
Right. We have a 5-year contract with First Student, but the number of buses is our decision. So if we say to them, look, we only need 90 buses next year, then we pay for 90 buses next year. If we have to, so the number of buses is not fixed, nor is the type of bus fixed. So, and we also have control, to the extent that John Fickey can schedule it, how many tiers each bus does. So, you know, in other words, does it do one run, two runs, or 3 runs in a given day?
Now, we
Right.
haven't done this analysis before.
Right.
I know you're scared it's coming.
Yes.
But-
And I didn't ask him to come tonight because I didn't think we'd want to get into the level of detail, but John will be here at the next meeting if we
Okay.
want to pursue it a little bit more. But the contract does not obligate us to a certain number of buses.
Okay,
That
well,
is
that's good
within
to
our
know.
control.
So
And
let me
it-
make the request now so that he has time to provide it to me before he attends the meeting at the next session, which is, can we get detail on the number of buses and the number of children that are allocated to each of the buses? I guess within the rounds also, because I guess there'd be elementary, high school, middle school. I guess you must have, I don't know how many buses that is.
He has it.
Some sort of he must have a detailed thing
Yes.
that he can send us. I know.
Yes. You want detail? He's your man.
Yeah, maybe too much detail.
Correct.
Maybe I should be more specific.
You've learned.
But
Be careful of what you ask for from
right.
Mr. Fickey.
So the number of buses and the number of kids allocated to each of the buses for pickup drop-off. And then this is a question that might require more or less, maybe they track this, but the actual number of kids that take the buses, approximately. And I find that interesting just personally because I know that there's many, many people who actually drive their kids to and from school. And so I'm interested in understanding of the students that we actually allocate busing for, how many actually utilize it.
I don't know if we have that, but we have to have a seat for everybody. So we looked at this once as like a cost containment measure. And, you know, there may be kids that take the buses some days, and on other days, they take it in bad weather, they'll take it
No, I understand.
Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm
But
not
at the end
sure
of
how
the-
much we have on actual ridership. I will say, just in general, that our transportation department does an incredible job of squeezing every efficiency that's possible out of every route. And sometimes buses can't have a full load because of the sheer distance they have to cover. If they stopped and picked up kids all the way, the bus ride would be 2 hours.
No, I
So
understand.
going off into some of the distant lands,
Right.
you may only have 20 or 25 students on a bus because it's got to get up to Hoydens Hill Road and go around up there, then get all the way back down. So
But just to, so you
There's
understand,
variation,
I
yeah.
asked this question because I am aware that, you know, sometimes a family might be called who doesn't use the busing, and they'll be asked, are you planning on using the busing, or will you be driving, picking up as a permanent matter? And it would allow us to not have to make that stop.
No.
Yes, because it's happened. So I'm gonna say if it shouldn't happen, okay, that's one thing.
No,
But
lem-
if in
let me,
fact
clarify.
we have the
We may-
option,
We may not, no, we may not have to make the stop because no child is standing there,
Mm-hmm.
but we still have to have a seat reserved in case that child is standing there.
yes,
That's per
it has to
state
be made
law.
available if upon request.
No.
No, by state law. There's a lot of things that we have control over, but a
That's not one of
seat
'em.
for every child is mandated, and we have no control over that. Whether they use it or not, we have to have a seat for them. That's state law.
So, okay, so before I walk down this path, and let me understand. So if let's say a parent proactively says, I am not going to be using the bus all year, we have to pay for the bus anyways.
Yes. No, we have to pay for the seat.
We have to pay for the seat
We have
anyways.
to reserve a seat in a bus.
So you're telling me that if everybody decides that they're not going to take the bus, we have to run all the buses?
We don't, it's an unrealistic.
They have to sit there
it's an
in a parking
unrealistic
lot.
hypothetical.
Yes.
No, but it
Yeah.
is a hypothetical, because, for example, if I could reroute all of them, and I could say that 10% of the population did not ride the buses, I could theoretically sit 10% of the fleet in a parking lot, and I'd be required to have them park. Is that true?
It might be that you should send your question in so that Mr. Fickey could know exactly what you're asking. The specific, the clear answer is that we have to provide a seat for every child. If your question is, if we knew that every family in Greenfield Hill did not want a bus, would we still have to provide for bus transportation for those students?
Would we still have to drive the bus, stop at each of those stops?
So you should send that question in, because you're really asking a legal question, I think, and so Mr. Fickey can be prepared to respond to that.
Okay, how can I...
And he might be able to provide a memo that, in advance, that might give you clarity.
Okay, so I should send the email directly to him, or should I just submit the question and
No, you
will-
can
Dr.
just send it
Title,
to
and
me,
he'll
and
get it to-
we'll get it
I'll
to the
send
right
to you.
person.
Fine. Okay, so that was that.
I am a little worried, I just want to say, the volume of, and I don't mind doing this, okay? I don't know if we're going to get all of these requests done by Tuesday. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Based on what I've heard and what the workload appears to be involved in some of them, just hunch. We will do our best. I will get you all the information possible that we can get, but I'm just a little concerned about getting it all done by next Tuesday. We may need a couple days. I don't know. We will do our best. I know Doreen's keeping track of it. There have been some requests that are going to be very time-consuming, but we will do our best. I'm not saying no, just saying this is going to be a considerable amount of work,
Okay, so
and
I
I
think
just want to
you'll-
just flag that in case you don't get it right away.
Okay, so you'll send in an email so it's clear what Mr. Fickey should be
Right.
researching for you, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions that you have?
My one last one was,
Please do.
okay, regarding the testing of the gifted and talented. I wanted to understand how many kids were actually accepted in the program in the last 1, 2, 3 years, let's say. Does that make sense? Because I want to understand whether it makes sense to reinstitute a second year of we cut the testing, if you recall, and we've moved the date like 3 times. We made it from 3rd and 5th grade down to 2nd and 4th grade, and then removed it to just 3rd grade. And my understanding is that now the testing is in the fall of 3rd grade. So these are like 2nd graders taking a 3rd grade test because they've just started 3rd grade. And so the question is twofold, and it's budgetary in the concern that are, in fact, because we're cutting training for the teachers is part of the identification of these kind of kids on the other end of the spectrum. And I guess my question is if we're cutting that training, then we rely even more heavily on the testing itself. And how much is the testing? And so let me step back a second. How many are we actually accepting into the gifted program that don't make the testing criteria? First question in the last 3 years, year by year. Second, how many have been accepted via testing? And then I'd like to know what the cost would be to reinstitute 2nd and 4th grade.
One of the things that might be helpful, because it seems as though some questions have been asked, I'm looking at that clock over there, some questions have been asked that the answers may not be helpful to you to answer the approval of the budget question, but they're questions that I think you said it would be nice to know. And so
Actually, they're
let
all
me finish
related.
my sentence. And so you might help the staff to identify which are critical questions that you need answered for the budget vote and which they would have a little bit more time to get you the answer for.
Well, I'm hoping this wouldn't be too difficult because there usually aren't that many kids per grade, and because there's only one grade we test now.
Okay, thank you. And that was your last question, right? So we are at the 11 o'clock hour. Do we wish to stop here, or do we wish to continue?
I think she wants to make a motion.
What's your motion?
So I want to say
Oh, no,
something,
what's
and then
your
I'm
motion?
making, I want to say something, and then I want to make a motion, since I've asked almost no question. Is that
Please do.
if everyone could please remember to CC all the board members on these questions and get them into Dr. Title by tomorrow, because as I'm going through, I know, making my own questions, I don't want to duplicate effort, and I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn has been made, seconded. The motion's properly in order. All in favor, raise your hand.
Debatable?
We take public comment on the motion.
All in favor, please raise your hand. We have 8 in favor. Do you wish to, what is your vote?
You said all in favor, anything else?
Yes, all opposed? All opposed? You'll oppose. Thank you, Mr. Fattabine. We are adjourned.